Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Ichigo Awakens in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 90, Quincy in London. With Uriu. The young Quincy was sitting on a double-decked bus, passing through the streets of the city, rubbing his fingers along the badge he was given solely for this trip. He was in his Quincy fashion Soul Reaper garb, blending in better than if he wore his usual white, reflecting on the mission he was given. His friends were all around the world, searching for Quincy belonging to the Van Den Reich, while he was told to go find any information he could in the only other likely place to have information on the enemy. The western branch of Soul Society, located in the hidden side of London. This close to his destination, he couldn't help but think back to when he was told about this. Flashback. Uriu, you're going to London to look for any information on Wywak in the western branch of Soul Society. Ishine told the Quincy, handing him a badge in the shape of a shield with SSMB on the face and a coin with the same shield emblem. Yamamoto sent them a message to expect your coming, but you should still be careful. Considering the mess that Wywak's Quincy made, believe that you'll be walking on eggshells the entire time. He finished, finally giving Uriu the chance to ask. Western branch of Soul Society? He asked, never hearing of multiple branches of the afterlife. It did make sense though, since the Soul Society he knew only covered Japan while mankind was all over the world. What do the Shinigami call themselves there? They're not actually Soul Reapers, Uriu, and they don't really deal with the dead. Ishine said, confusing the archer. In these cases, Uriu, they're closer to what the Quincy could have been had there not been such intense animosity between Shinigami and Quincy. They see that which is meant to be unseen and protect the normal living folk from the monsters. I personally haven't been there myself, but I've heard that you'll be dealing with witches, wizards, and dragons. Flashback end. This coin is supposed to get me to this reverse London place. Uriu thought, now fiddling with the coin as he made his way to where he sensed a strong concentration of reishi. It felt similar to a Senkaimon gate, but there was also two more notable presences there. Were they the members of Reverse London, or were they dragons? Either way, he felt obligated to act and began running to his apparent destination. It was a run-down abandoned alley, the kind no one would spare a second glance down, with an enormous classic-style dragon with pitch-black scales digging its head in a hole where he heard two people screaming. So that's a dragon? Uriu said, analyzing the beast. Not exactly at a Minos level, but I should still be careful. Pull through this Asushi, because I'll definitely protect you. He heard one of the people yell out as he grabbed a seal schneider. In an instant, he formed a blade and charged toward the serpent. The blade easily cut through the scales and flesh of the beast, causing it to cry out in pain. When he did that, a column of light rings appeared behind the dragon, with two girls in school uniforms coming out of it. There it is. The dark dragon. One of them yelled out, a girl with blonde pigtails. With her was another girl with long black hair that seemed completely disinterested. Both were riding smaller creatures that seemed like dragon-modeled kites. Hey, what's that down there? The blonde girl asked as the dragon swiped its tail at Uriu, forcing him to jump back. Is that a dash? Noel. Show me your panties. The dragon roared out, surprising everyone. Uriu was still processing what the dragon roared out when the girl, Noel, he thought, starting calling out for someone named Balgo. Noel is flying. One of the guys, dirty blonde hair with a dark hoodie and pants holding a small dog, cried out while his buddy looked on in shock. He wasn't the interesting one, that would be the other guy. A stocky man with curly black hair, and a pitch-black spirit ribbon when Uriu looked at it. Forget this. Balgo, let's get out of here. The stocky guy yelled out as he turned and ran. This is getting crazy. The blonde witch started flying toward the fleeing man. Stop. I think that's dash. Wait, Nai, the tracker says there are two dash. Uriu and the other witch called out, just as the human's head burst into some weird spiral maw, with Nai in the middle of its mouth. The witch barely managed to get out of the new dragon's mouth, getting a badly broken arm in the process. I thought I could split you all up and pick you off one by one. The human form peeled off like a reptile exploding out of its skin, revealing an amorphous beast with a cone-shaped head that unwound like a screw. The dragon turned its attention to Uriu. You don't smell like a wizard, what are you? The panty dragon behind Uriu soon exploded as the other witch got next to Uriu. That's what I want to know too, she said, holding up some odd-looking flintlock pistol at the dragon. He's a Quincy Noel, Nai accused, shocking the black-haired witch. A member of the race that damn near destroyed the balance of souls. Nai pointed her gun at Uriu, who kept his focus on the dragon. For all their kill-them-all attitude toward their monsters, you'd think they'd manage to clean up the mess of you bastards. And you should remember to prioritize your targets, Uriu said, shoving the witch out of the way while the dragon's mouth unwound to try and eat both her and him. Uriu reinforced his body with blood venom, letting the teeth of the dragon scrape harmlessly on his skin, before backhanding the beast away from him, and back toward Nai, which the dragon was capitalizing on by attempting to eat her now. She was shoved out of the way by Balgo, who got his back torn up by fangs, as he looked to the dragon and recoiled in shock at seeing the beast for the first time. You should have run, Balgo, the dragon said, almost sounding sorry for its friend. If this is the quality of opponents I can expect to face, then I am severely disappointed, Uriu taunted, before the dragon was reduced to nothing by a single arrow shot from a small bow in the Quincy's hand. He turned back around, to come face to face with a pair of toyish pistols. You're explaining what the hell is going on, Quincy? Nai demanded while Noelle kept her calm. Make it snappy before we shoot you, she threatened, only to instantly be disarmed and restrained while Noelle was kicked into the side of a building. Both of you have ranged weapons. Uriu started lecturing as he planted a foot on the witch's neck and readied his bow to shoot the other one. You never stand too close to your target unless you want to gamble your reflexes against theirs. As for what I'm doing here, do either of you know the name, Uriu Ishida? He asked, getting no answer from either witch. Suddenly Noelle's phone started going off, playing a Dragon Ball theme, and she looked to the Quincy. Uriu nodded and she answered her phone. Chief, we have a situation here, she immediately said into her phone, uncaring about the Quincy aiming his bow at her. Does it involve a Quincy? A man's voice responded back, surprising the witch. I just heard about it myself and I still can't believe the news. Ask him for identification. Noelle looked back to Uriu. Do you have an ID? She asked, surprising the other witch under Uriu's heel. Without releasing his bow, Uriu dug out the badge he was given specifically for this mission and tossed it to Stoic Witch. She caught it and began reading off the information. Soul Society, Main Branch, Uriu Ishida. Squad 15 Lieutenant. How the hell is a Quincy a member of that ghost club? Nai demanded. And there's only 13 squads. Soul Society has undergone some changes in the last year, Uriu answered, removing his foot and helping the girl up, also ignoring her indignant cries as he quickly reset her arm so the bones would be back in their proper place. He began walking to Noelle, who put her phone on speaker. Do you know why I'm here? Can't say that I do, this is the first anyone here has heard from that Soul Society in centuries, the man responded. I only heard we were expecting a high-ranking member of the Godii to visit. I was only told that person was a Quincy after I sent those two to eliminate the dark dragons in the area and you appeared on the radar. Well, the Godii has been undergoing several reforms over the past year, Uriu started to explain. All because the Quincy Emperor is still alive and the war is coming back. A terrified silence washed over everyone, except for Balgo who had no idea what was happening. I'm here because the Captain Commander thinks that the West Branch has some information that might prove useful. Why would a Quincy turn against his own kind? The blonde witch asked, glaring at Uriu. Because even I know the kind of monster Wywak is and want to stop him, the Quincy answered. Fine, welcome to Reverse London, the chief finally said. Nyahashi, Nai, you two are being reassigned to his escort. The old man in charge of the Godii seems to trust that Quincy, might as well let him do his job. And if he does anything funny, contact the Sabers. Neither of you can take on someone that earned the rank of lieutenant in the Godii. Nai got mad, snatched the phone away, and began yelling at her boss, who brushed everything she said aside. Is this normal? Uriu asked of Noelle, who could only nod and confirm it. And here I thought I was finally going to escape this. Happens a lot with your group? She asked. My captain is a man-child that only does work when we force him to his desk and when he's protecting the city. And he's been worrying about Lisa ever since he got on that plane to London. Illustrated Guide to Soul Reapers, Quincy. Differences. So in short, we are still living and have a constant flow of new ideas on how to deal, we domesticate, and tame our beasts, and we didn't need almost 2,000 years of stagnation to decide to change something. Nainai bragged while Uriah looked through a history book dating back to Waiwaka's kingdom. But, I'll give those Soul Reaper barbarians this. They finally decided to stop killing everything. So why do you kill dark dragons? Uriah asked, surprising the blonde, but she was still able to answer. Because they're dangerous monsters that will kill innocent people. Now can you imagine if all dragons were like that? Uriah returned, shocking the witch. If they couldn't be tamed and just continued to kill and eat without end? That's our problem with hollows, and it's why we just kill them all. The only change to that was after horrific and illegal experiments by someone that wanted to conquer the whole world, and they are included because hollows would be useful against Quincy, which also threaten the balance of souls. He closed the book, putting it on the table before grabbing the next. There's the difference. You have the leeway we can't afford. Nainai couldn't respond as she tried to imagine if all dragons were like dark dragons. Haunted one. So, someone want to explain this? Uriah asked, pointing to Balgo, who now had a leash and collar around his neck. Well, the kid was bitten by a dragon and became what we call a haunted one. Said the witch's boss, Billy Banks Jr., a man in a green cap and jacket with very shaggy hair and a crooked cigarette in his mouth. Biologically, they're classified as a type of dragon and therefore under our care. Like a pet. Uriah guessed, looking at the boy in question. Because the Arankar have way more dignity than that. Noel, show me your panties. The dog on Balgo's head suddenly said, causing the witch to start chasing him with intent to kill. I think I prefer Mayuri to this place. Uriah decided. Chapter 91, What's Happening in Soul Society. Project Spearhead's Progress. Kisuke Urahara was making his rounds around the labs and barracks of Squad 12, checking in on the progress of the various projects and experiments the Shinigami R&D were in charge of. Ichigo's excursion into the new dimension certainly was a boon for ideas with those Imperial arms, but full recreations of them were impossible due to the lack of the same materials used in their construction. That, however, was a challenge that Urahara and Mayuri relished. Now if only some of the other captains and lieutenants would help out as well. Kisuke figured Swafon would jump at improving the lethality of her Suzumibuki, but the Wasp refused any tampering, both Soul Reaper and Zanpakuto. I get the risks with that Murasame blade, but she's the captain of the assassination unit. He growled while heading to the revived Mod Soul branch. Once he entered, he found rows of dozens of bodies and tubes of all varieties. Along the middle were rows of monitors and computers with what squad members and scientists he could spare, with Nozomi Kyujo at the head of it all. All right, everyone ready? She called out, wearing a lab coat over her shiakusho, which for some reason had a mini skirt. Not a lot of complaints about that, nor did work slow down, not since he threatened that anyone who slacked off would be sent to Mayuri's playground as a new test subject. Okay, armor shift test number 9. Begin. Suddenly, one of the tubes on the right side glowed red as the body inside started to shift and mutate. Some parts got a metallic sheen while others got bulkier, like thick plate armor, then the body began bleeding. Shut it down. The Verdette sighed, slumping in her chair. What's the damage? Torn muscles, tendons, and ligaments, perforated lungs, ruptured heart, cranial hemorrhaging, fractured spine and other bones all throughout, and the guts can be best described as pulp, ma'am. One person reported. Nozomi released a growl of frustration. At least it didn't explode this time. She said, finally noticing her captain. How can I help you, Kisuke? Please make it quick, it's been a rough week. So I've noticed. He commented, looking over the reports that was sent to him over the course of the experiments. I'll try to get back to Ichigo on sending us more concrete samples of the taiga. We've just recently got our hands on some internal organs from someone whose taiga was literally her blood. Mayuri is experimenting with it now and I'll send Ichigo some Jigai as recompense. He did mention that he's got some recruits finally. Just then, a loud crash and metal tearing sounded out throughout the base, followed by several pained cries, and one joyous success. Ahahaha. Mayuri sang, for reasons most of the squad could only guess. Did you finish that one for the Aaron car? It's in the back, sir. Nozomi said as most of her team got back to work. One unlucky sap drew the short straw and was stuck cleaning the bloodied tube. Government change of Soul Society. Ugh, this is so boring. Kyukaku groaned out, pouring herself another cup of sake while she, Yuzhiro, and Byakuya continued to work. Soon after Rigai debacle finally ended, Yamamoto killed the members of the Central 46 that planned a coup in a desperate act to retain their power and authority, which now necessitated the act of putting the new democratic government into action. 5 elected officials for every district to discuss law and economics, 2 more from every district to form a separate representative house to handle things between districts of each region, and another 8 plus the captain of Squad 14 to govern the Rukon as a whole. Finally, another 4 to represent each region and attend meetings with the heads of the great noble houses and chairmen of the house, who govern civil actions in the Siriti. Altogether, this group would ensure every district had a voice. For the judicial side, 1 judge per district, 5 per region, and 9 for the Siriti, all elected by the people for the Rukon and appointed by votes of the Godi for the Siriti. So why were these 3 great noble heads meeting? Found another crime lord. Yuzhiro announced, holding up a report from the Onmitsukido. The reason for this meeting was to plan the future elections and eventual first meeting of the new government, and as one should expect there were a few shady characters looking to get more power and authority. Drug trafficking, child abuse, unethical workplace, the usual. Yamamoto ordered them to ensure only clean record and sound character officials could be elected to their respective position, advised by the Siriti judges on the current laws, or as close as they can get. I forget, are brothels illegal? Only if they discriminate gender, ignore employee consent, offer no healthcare or birth control, and have substandard work/living conditions. Byakuya droned out. As distasteful as I find such establishments, we must take it slow to fully civilize the Soul Society. Gladiator arenas. Given a pass as killing and crippling is forbidden and considered good training to get into one of the Shinigami starter schools around the Rukon. Kyukaku answered, chugging her sake from the bottle as they barely make a dent in the paperwork. We're gonna die in here, aren't we? Kenpeki vs Kenpeki. It's been a while since he was down here, dropping into the final dark level of the Mukin prison cell. The endless expanse of dark oblivion where only few were ever permitted, either by imprisonment or to train without restraint. The last time he was here was for neither of these reasons, but to enjoy his time with his predecessor and now wife, Yachiro Retsuya Nohana. Now he's back, not for imprisonment or training, but for an execution. To kill the only man still imprisoned in the Mukin. You can show yourself at any time. Zaraki called out into the darkness. The only way out of here is through me. He pulled out a tag before placing it on the elevator, immediately wrapping it in burning reishi reminiscent of Ichigo's own reishi. And you'll have to kill me to get out. Soon he heard footsteps that revealed their master as a man that was more slim than Byakuya Kukiki. He was close to a foot shorter than Zaraki and looked more like a member of royalty rather than the captain of Squad 11, with a long ponytail and framing bangs of dark purple hair. So, you're the 8th Kenpeki. Soya Azashiro, Kenpeki Zaraki? The man answered. Kenpeki Azashiro, the 8th holder of the title Kenpeki, sealed away in the Mukin after staging a coup, and it took the entire royal guard at the time to best him and lock him away. This was 1,000 years ago, his Zanpakuto was never found and he still looked as healthy as the day before his revolt. So what brings a brute like yourself down here again? He asked, looking down on the savage while planning an attack. Are you here to offer me a chance at freedom if I choose to fight with Soul Society against the Quincy? That's certainly one option I'm here to give. Zaraki stated, not at all surprised with the knowledge the prisoner displayed. The other is that I execute you. So why don't you do us both a favor and submit? The prisoner sighed and shook his head. I have been listening and watching, but do you really expect me to just bow my head to a child? he asked, thinking back to his shock when Yamamoto named Ichigo his intended successor. I have sensed his power, but I refuse to acknowledge a brat like him as my better. If you make me the head captain of the Godai, I might consider it. Zaraki nodded his head. I understand, he said before unsheathing his blade and dashing at the former Kenpeki, slamming his blade down and creating a thunderous earth-shaking crash. I said this was going to be an execution anyway. Oz's hero flashed back and Zaraki felt something move across his chest. Did you just try to cut me? He asked, seeing the former Kenpeki look on in shock. If you did, then it was weak. This is a cut, he said as he held his Zanpakuto in both hands and swung his blade, stopping just shy of striking the ground. There was an explosion of force in air, creating a notable dust storm in the prison cell, and an air blade that barely missed Oz's hero. The prisoner looked on in shock at the display of power as the air around Zaraki burned with his riot suit, giving the impression of a burning skull behind him. Come on. You once held the title of Kenpeki. Make this entertaining, he ordered, smiling savagely at his opponent. What is he? Oz's hero thought as fear crept back up into his being, a feeling he thought he had long since disposed of. Mozo, he said, creating hundreds of mouths and hands around them with each one chanting the incantation of a high-level Hado and creating a black box around Zaraki. Hado number 90, Kuro Hitsuji. He finished before the Kido exploded, revealing an unscathed Zaraki. That child's spells have more punch to them than that did, the Kenpeki said, flicking his sword after destroying those Hado with a single swing. Is that really all you've got? He demanded, the former Kenpeki racking his brain trying to come up with something that could actually hurt the monster before him. What a disappointment, he said, resting his blade on his shoulder. If you won't bring out your Zanpakuto, I'll force you to drink. Noza Desh he started before feeling something against his tongue before Oz's hero cried out in pain. Oh. I get it now. When you told the Central 46 that you've already shown your Zanpakuto, you meant it was still active. Everything around you is your Zanpakuto. That is the power of my Uzakuro, Oz's hero admitted. With it, I can merge with anything, turn anything into my blade or my shield, use as many Kido as I want at the same time. I'm not just merged with the air in the Mukin, I'm merged with the whole of Soul Society. And despite all that power, you've never escaped or even hurt me. Guess there are limits to what you can do after all. Zaraki taunted, earning a glare from the former Kenpeki. I said to make this entertaining, if you don't pull out all the stops to fight me then I'll kill you quickly, the captain threatened, shortly before Oz's hero began to fade away. Zaraki needed a second to compose himself from the sudden disappearance of the prisoner, then his head snapped upward and he jumped. Rocketing himself up to the proper height, he swung his blade and cut the very air. Oz's hero reformed and screamed in pain as blood spilled from a massive cut on his chest, followed by Zaraki grabbing his leg and throwing him back to the ground. Did you just try to run away? The Kenpeki growled as he landed next to his opponent. How did you cut me? Oz's hero demanded, feeling in mortal danger for the first time in his long life. I was one with air. Let me remind you of what I am, Zaraki said as he placed his foot on the former Kenpeki's chest. I was a nameless runt from the furthest and most lawless district of the Rukon, killing and fighting was all I knew and how I survived. No one was stronger than me, no one could even hurt me, not until after I fought her. Kenpeki Yachiro, the first to bear our title. He pointed to the lone scar he had over his eye. That was the first time I ever enjoyed myself in a fight and the first time I was afraid when I almost killed her. I weakened myself to an embarrassing degree in an effort to enjoy as many fights as I could. Then one day I found a little girl, she did not fear me or reject me, and I would choose to name her after the only person I respected and take the title of Kenpeki as my name. I killed the previous Kenpeki in a single strike, became a captain with no training and no access to the true power of my Zanpakuto. I've stayed like that for so long until I met a certain kid, a kid that welcomed my challenge, a kid that freed me of my greatest fear, a kid that grew into a warrior I'd be proud to follow into hell itself if he asked, because he promised me all the fun I could ever ask for. I am the Kenpeki, the strongest soul reaper of the Godai, and that brat is Ichigo Kurosaki, the future captain commander of the Godai. There is nothing that can stand against either of us. He stepped off of Oz's hero and pulled the man to his feet. Now as a courtesy of one Kenpeiga to another, I'll let you die on your feet. One last strike, he said, taking a kendo stance and holding his sword in both hands. Oz's hero glared at Zaraki before releasing a sigh. I suppose that's the best offer I'll get, he finally said before holding out his hand. Slowly, a Nazuashi blade formed in his grip. Let's do this. Despite how plain the sword looked, it radiated with power. Likely the concentrated amount of Reishi that it took for him to merge with the whole of Soul Society during his long years of imprisonment. The two raised their blades, charged, and swung, creating a massive explosion of force and power that rocked the Siridi high above them. When the dust finally settled, Kenpeiga sheathed his blade and Oz's hero fell to the ground. The life of the 8th Kenpeiga was ended. Soul Society tried to forget you, but no more. You will be remembered. Zaraki promised as he returned to the elevator, tearing off the Kido tag that created its barrier. Soul Society is done hiding from its past. Other Quincy preparations. Hey, is this safe? A guy strapped to a table asked, nervous and terrified as Mayuri typed away a few commands at his station. He had to pause his other project while they cleared out the ice and repaired the damage done, but still had many other projects to work on in the meantime. Who cares? Mayuri responded before pulling a switch. Besides, you're a death row inmate so it doesn't really matter. The man screamed in horror and pain as the chamber was flooded with hollow Reishi. Seconds passed, filled with screams of pain and torment, before finally falling silent as the man faded from existence. After an extensive analysis done on Urayu and BG9, Urahara and Mayuri figured out how to make artificial Quincy while using the squad 15th Lieutenant as a base. The experiment was multi-purpose in testing an idea as a countermeasure against the Quincy of the Vandenreich. Effectiveness against the Quincy, the effects it would have on other souls and Shinigami, the effects on Aaron Carr, and how Ichigo's own Reishi would affect the experiment. If the results were as Mayuri and Kisuk predict, they'd either get asset denial or potentially boost Ichigo's powers as a result. No question that what they were doing was one of the most vile war crimes, but Waiwak was not known for his humanity. The old guard of the Godai were ruthless for a reason. Next one is ready, Master Mayuri. Nimue said, sounding more monotone than usual. Recently made Aaron Carr from a random hollow. She brought in a blonde man with a helmet mask fragment. Something wrong, Nimue? He asked in a rare display of concern, knowing her attitude might affect her performance. I miss sex with my boyfriend, she said, making Mayuri sigh and continue with his very unethical experiments. Chapter 92, Ichigo's Allies' Progress. Hueco Mundo. It was a quiet day in the endless deserts of Hueco Mundo, naught but sand and night as far as the eye can see except for one place. A single shining light, brightest light in all of Hueco Mundo, the Torre Estrella, standing above the Palace of Las Noches and signaling all other cognizant hollows to join the kingdom of Aaron Carr. A peace that was rarely broken by hungry Ajichas that escaped the forest of Minos and aimed to evolve to the next stage, some hoping to be recognized by the court of knights that protect the palace and the steward that governs in the absence of the king. All to end their own fear of being lost in the mindless drone of the Jillian or execution by the hands of the 16th Squad of Soul Society. For many it was a simple choice, but there have been some rogue and stubborn elements that seek to conquer the kingdom for themselves. That quiet peace ended that day with powerful shockwaves of force, cirroblasts, and roars of anger. Die! Grimjo roared, clad black in his Segunda Etapa, attacking another Aaron Carr. He dashed at his opponent, slashing with his claws and tearing through air and sand as the Aaron Carr dodged. The Aaron Carr had silver-toned skin, chin-length turquoise hair, yellow eyes, with his hole below his collarbone and hollow mask fragment on his right cheek, just under his eye and wrapped around his head, and green wings of energy shooting from his back. Grimjo glared at him with fury, but he just held that cocky smirk as he dodged Grimjo's claws. You'll pay for what you did to Starkey. Desgarin. The panther promised as energy blades from his claws appeared while he continued to slash at his opponent. Hollows, Aaron Carr, all serving a Soul Reaper. How pathetic. The man taunted as he continued to dodge Grimjo. It was a normal day in Hueco Mundo, then he tried to invade and conquer Las Noches. Coyote Starkey was napping along the outer wall but still kept his pesquisa up in case something happened, but just when he did sense something, he felt something strike him in the gut and send him through the roof of the palace. Rudborn's exiguous squad of endless soldiers were little more than grains of sand against the attacker's storm, and Runugunga wasn't permitted in the castle for safety reasons. It didn't take long for the others to storm in and retaliate, forcing him to retreat but not without issuing a threat that Las Noches would be his. Starkey was still unconscious and badly injured. Grimjo had charged after him, and while Jin and Ulquiorra tried to figure out who the Arrancar was, the others were on high alert for anything else attacking the palace. "Where's your pride as a hollow? In serving my king, the strongest of us all?" The panther growled at his opponent, blasting a zero at him that failed to hit as the Arrancar dodged and laughed the whole while. "If you want Ichigo's throne, you'll have to go through me first." He attempted another slash at the invader, who generated a blade of energy from his hand. The two were locked in their struggle, Grimjo struggling while his opponent showed almost no effort on his part. "Is that Soul Reaper really so impressive?" the Silver Arrancar asked, refusing to believe that any Shinigami could be stronger than he. "He didn't feel that strong when I attacked. And if he is as powerful as you claim, then why send a lackey here to fight his battles?" He continued to taunt, making Grimjo grow more furious with the arrogant Arrancar, before he was suddenly blasted by a bala shot from Ulquiorra's hand. "His Majesty, Ichigo Kurosaki, is currently away from Hueco Mundo undergoing a different sort of training," the most loyal knight announced while the Arrancar refocused, looking no worse for wear. "If our king was here, then you'd already either be at his feet or in his teeth." Ulquiorra himself was in his segunda etapa state, wanting to waste no time in fighting and ending this threat to his family in the Hollow Kingdom. "Your ambition dies here, Arturo Platedo. If you wanted to know me, you could have asked," Platedo said, glaring at the upstart nuisance that dared to stand against him. It didn't make any sense to the Arrancar. Hollows and Soul Reapers were enemies, and yet this force of Arrancar bowed to this Ichigo? No existence was stronger than he is, and he'll prove it, by killing all the Arrancar that stand against him and then killing whoever that Ichigo Kurosaka fellow is. "Hearing you talk just pisses me off," Grimjo returned, going to Ulquiorra's side. "I'd prefer you never talk, but if I had to listen to you, I'd like to hear you choke on your own blood while my claws tear into your throat." He turned his attention to his partner. "So we got a name, do we have a history?" "We almost didn't, only Yamamoto and Anohana remembered him," the bat answered. Arturo Platedo, a 1,000-year-old Arrancar, naturally made one at that was also sealed away in Soul Society by the Godai after destroying half of their military, freed after the destruction of the Sokyoku. Seems like he now decided to attempt to finish what he started and destroy all of the Shinigami. So was he before or after the Quincy War? Grimjo had to ask because either way would tell him which was the more dangerous foe, the Arrancar before them or the Quincy Emperor. After Waiwak, but the Godai had some time to recover. Ulquiorra answered, while Arturo seemed somewhat confused by the conversation. Still, even taxed by their previous battle and launching a surprise attack on an unsuspecting force, he survived the original Godai and had to be sealed away. The worst news, his power is similar to Ichigo's in that he absorbs the Reishi of anyone he kills. "I do not know who this Waiwak or Ichigo is, but it makes no difference to me," Arturo spoke up, getting the pair's attention while Ulquiorra circled around the rogue. "I will kill all who stand against me and use their power to strengthen my own. That's all your precious Soul Reaper King will be in the end," he promised while a lance appeared in Ulquiorra's hand. "Then there's no point in this conversation," Grimjo said, flexing his claws, growling, and charging his Ryotsu while Ulquiorra charged his Lanza del Relampago with screeching lighting. Arturo grinned, ready for the next bout, until a blade stabbed itself into his chest. Jin soon appeared with his fox mask on and reached for Arturo's chest. The Silver Arrancar, however, knocked Jin's hand aside and attempted to stab through the Shinigami's chest himself. Ulquiorra wrapped his tail around Arturo's neck while Grimjo slashed into his gut with his desk Aaron, the bat now throwing the injured Arrancar with all of his might as far as he could. "Gran Rey Zero!" the panther roared, firing a blast that shaped itself into a panther's head. "Lanza del Relampago!" Ulquiorra joined, throwing him spear with another and another in quick succession. The sky was set on fire with the fury of the attack before Ulquiorra and Grimjo finally stopped their assault. This likely didn't work. He did survive the original Godei. Ulquiorra thought, trying to focus on where Arturo may appear next. The unfortunate answer came when Ulquiorra was stabbed by a blade of energy from behind, Arturo looking none the worse for wear aside from a torn and burned outfit. "I'm impressed. That actually stung," he hissed, tearing out the beam blade from Ulquiorra's chest, punching Jin aside, and blasting Grimjo with a zero of his own. "You could have made great underlings, but this would have been your fate either way. Serving to make me stronger." Grimjo was unconscious from the attack, Jin was dazed and stumbling about, and Ulquiorra felt his strength leave him. "But in the end, like all things before me, you are nothing. Your Shinigami King will be nothing, and I will use him to fuel my continuously growing power. Die now and add to my strength, nameless traitor." Arturo conjured another blade and held it to Ulquiorra's throat. "Ichigo, is this how I'll die? Failing you again?" The bat thought. It was all he could think about. He thought back to when he swore his entirety to the hybrid after their rematch and Ichigo refused to kill him, to when he protected and watched over the child that would become a king, to the king in action promising a new future for those under his command, to his order of keeping the peace. Now he was about to die and fail his master. Fail his king. "Who are you?" He heard a voice call out, one that was utterly unrecognizable. "Why do you fight? Do you seek power? Why?" It just asked as time seemed to slow down. "I want to keep my promise to my king," Ulquiorra answered. "I promised to serve him, he ordered that Las Noches and its people would be safe and I want to ensure that. Would you give him your life? If necessary, even if he'd be furious with me. Then try not to die." It finished before Ulquiorra exploded with power. Arturo was blasted back as Ulquiorra erupted into a pillar of green and black energy. "What the hell? What is this?" the Arrancar demanded as the energy slowly died down. "I am Ulquiorra Sifur, loyal knight to the King of Hollows, Ichigo Kurosaki. I swore that I would serve him loyally and I will not let his kingdom fall when he is away." Arturo Platedo, know your end. The bat promised as the energy dissipated, revealing Ulquiorra in a new form. His hair grew longer and turned white, his horns were replaced with burning reishi of green and black, gained another set of wings and his fur turned to black robes, and the end of his tail burned with his reishi as well. "Humph, change all you want, it makes no difference in the end. No one may exist who are stronger than me," Arturo declared as his wings changed color to red and his Ryotsu grew more intense. Ulquiorra stood unaffected by the Arrancar's increase in power, he merely raised his hand at Arturo. "Tormenta de Mercy Lago," the bat said, enveloping Arturo in a vortex pillar of wind so fast that the fine grain of the sands of Hueco Mundo tore at Arturo's flesh. When Ulquiorra finally ended it, Arturo was a shredded but still healing mess. The silver Arrancar glared and growled at the bat, only to feel a hand on him and Jin finally say one phrase. "Koros, Kamishinai no Yuri." Arturo was helpless as his body disintegrated from Jin's poisonous Bankai. "So, what is that?" he asked Ulquiorra, as they both examined the new form. "Time skip, that night." That voice was the Hogyaku and it empowered Ulquiorra. Kisuke explained at the captain's meeting after collecting all the data. "From what we gather, though the Hogyaku is sealed and sleeping, it can still reach out to those it feels a connection to." Ulquiorra wanted to help Ichigo, the Hogyaku wants to help Ichigo since it's linked to his soul. It must have felt a connection to Ulquiorra and gave him the power-up as a result of Ulquiorra's own desires. "So can anyone access this potential?" Jin asked, speaking for the court of Arrancar knights in attendance. "Or do they have to pass some kind of test?" "Like I said, it's up to the Hogyaku," Urahara repeated. "We don't even have a clear idea on why it chose to strengthen Ulquiorra other than wanted to help Ichigo. This new development must be understood," Yamamoto declared, coming to a decision on the matter. "If the Hogyaku is indeed able to reach out beyond its seal, then we must study it. Since it has some measure of sentience that seems to grow more with time, then we'll have to ensure that it does not turn against us. Without the one it is linked to, I demand the utmost caution be taken while studying this phenomenon. Dismissed. Tatsuki's new teacher. Somewhere in China. The fiery martial artist was making her way through China, slaying hollows, doing various odd jobs to sustain herself, picking up various martial arts techniques to add to her skill set, and like her friends, hunting for any traces of the Vandenreich. She was unable to contact the others, but she felt a strange sixth sense that reminded her that they were doing all right. She spent a few months in China trying to absorb all she could before moving on through the West, doing all she could in her quest. She eventually came to an old abandoned temple where she took the chance to focus on the spirit aspect of her abilities. Shunko! She shouted, wearing the outfit she had on for the Hueco Mundo assault. The power surged through her arms and back as she trained to maintain the state, only for her control to break and release it. Damn, still too rough. She groaned, feeling her shoulder. That's quite a feat though, kid. She heard a weathered and mischievous voice from behind her say. She whipped around, got into her combat stance, and found the source of the voice. A short old man with gold hair that resembled a monkey in a monk's cassock with a staff in one hand and a pipe in the other, cyber shades, a large prayer bead necklace, and a simple headband. Not a lot of humans can harness that kind of power and appear out of nowhere. So, I'll ask some simple questions. Who are you and which side are you on? And do me a favor, tell the truth. He said before releasing a powerful aura and remaining cloaked in it. Okay, no way can I take this guy on. The teen quickly realized, feeling the power of the old man. Can I escape? Probably not. I didn't even sense his approach. Maybe I should play along for now. My name is Tatsuki Arisawa, and I side with the Soul Reapers. She said, dropping her stance and banking on the chance that this man was not a Quincy. The old man sucked on his pipe and blew out a cloud of smoke. Shinigami usually stay in Japan. He said, keeping his focus on the martial artist. What would bring one of their number all the way here? Also, I thought you had to be a soul first before becoming a Soul Reaper. They've lightened up on some restrictions, now you need sufficient Reishi and demonstrated ability to use it. She returned, now knowing she was talking to someone that knew about Soul Reapers and Soul Society. Especially with the coming Quincy War. Now there's a name I haven't heard in a long time, though I thought that the Shinigami wiped them out. It turns out that they hid themselves away, gathering knowledge and strength to restart the war they lost long ago, for the past 1,000 years. The old man took another puff of his pipe, blowing out another cloud of smoke. Does that mean Waiwak still lives? He said with audible disgust, giving Tatsuki more confidence that the man wasn't an enemy. Yes. Some of my friends are traveling the world looking for anything and everything Quincy related and to bolster our side for the fight to come. There was a silence as the old man thought. How long do you have? Tatsuki shrugged. Less than 2 years. The monkey man smiled and tapped his staff against the ground. That should be plenty of time to teach you how to harness Toki. He said happily, surprising Tatsuki. What? There are other powerful forces in the world, we've just been staying out of each other's business for the most part. Personally, I hate people like Waiwak and would rather see them crushed like the bastards they are. The martial artist weighed her options. The man was certainly powerful and the Vandenreich put the whole of Soul Society on alert. It didn't surprise her that Waiwak would have enemies beyond Soul Society, given what she's heard about him, and if she could learn this Toki she could be bringing back a great boon to all Shinigami. Okay, I'll be your student. What should I call you, old man? She asked, gaining another smirk from him. Just call me son for now. The now named son answered. If you survive, I'll tell you the rest. Battle in France. With Chad and Jackie. It was quiet in the months since they left Japan, doing their part in the search for Quincy-related matters. When they set foot in France, they agreed to split up and contact each other in the event they came across anything of relevance. Ririka immediately went out to browse for cute things. Kiriko said something about preparations before disappearing, leaving Jackie and Chad alone to do their search. However, without any leads and no real plan, they just toured around the country. Seeing the sights, talking about the experience, always keeping an eye and ear out for what they were looking for but not coming across anything noteworthy. It was like they were on dates instead of doing their mission, not that either could complain since they were enjoying the experience anyway. That all changed one night. Another day come and gone, and still with nothing to show for it. Jackie sighed out, bored from the inaction, while holding onto Chad's arm as they walked along. "Still holding up all right, big guy?" she asked her teammate and partner. It had been a few months since Chad utilized the new technique of the Fullbringers and did a severe amount of damage to his own soul. "I'm doing fine, Jackie," Yasutara answered, clenching his hand and flexing his arm to prove he was okay. "You don't need to hold on to me and help me walk around all the time." He sounded sincere, gentle, like he didn't want to burden anyone with his supposed problems. "I don't," she admitted. "But I like doing it," she thought to herself as they ended up by a shipping dock, where they both stopped and looked into the dock area. "Guess today might actually yield results," she said, just before jumping the fence with her partner in tow. The man inside had long, silky, purple hair, blunt yet pointy teeth, and looked absolutely ready to tear the two apart. "So, who the hell are you?" she asked the dark-armored man, who held a savage grin as he grabbed onto a lamp post. "Lancelot. Sternritter W. I kill. For king." The man growled as the lamp post turned black with red tears along the body, charging at the pair when it finished its odd transformation. Chad pushed Jackie behind him and brought out both shield arms and took the brunt of the attack, grunting under the effort as the blow pushed him and cratered the earth. But Lancelot was only getting started as he maneuvered the lamp post around to hit him with a home run swing, sending Chad through a building or three. Jackie shrouded herself in her clean boots shield and danced around the Sternritter's attempts to attack her, each one slipping away from her harmlessly while she pulled out a syringe filled with hollow reishi. Another experiment of Mayuri's in regards to seeing just how toxic it would be if injected directly, hoping for good results that would lead to a more efficient weapon against the Vandenreich. "Just need to get it in," she thought as she got within striking distance and disabled her shield. Before she could stab his neck with the needle, a black helm with a ponytail covered his head. The needle snapped against the spirit metal and the Berserker Knight threw a back fist at Jackie, sending her flying. Before Lance could do much else, Sato reappeared with his left arm in attack mode and he began attacking the Sternritter. The Devil's arm was blocked, with the shockwave still pulsing through and hitting the Quincy, but was less effective than Chad had hoped. He pressed the attack with a fully charged El Directo, blasting into Lance and sending him flying with the wave of reishi. The knight righted himself, throwing the two broken halves of the lamp post at Chad with Jackie coming to the rescue with her clean bubble shield. "Try to get in contact with Kiriko, I'll hold him off," the giant said, using the speed boost of the Fullbring to shoot himself at the knight, circling to the right at the last second to catch the Quincy off guard. The Fullbringer managed to strike true, creating a painful screech as the metal warped and caved around his hand with the skull shockwave pulsing through the knight and sending him flying into a building. Before Chad could prepare himself for the next bout, he felt a warm wetness at his side that was followed by intense pain. He looked down to see he was cut, leaving a deep gash in his side, from something. Looking back to Lancelot would reveal a spear in his armored hands that was pulsing with the twisted powers that affected the lamp post. "W. Weapon Master," the Quincy said before throwing the spear at Chad, followed by several others. The Fullbringer brought out both of his shields and dodged or blocked every spear he could, still getting slashed by the occasional spear and getting more sluggish as a result while the spears tore apart the area around and behind Chad. Apparently displeased with his lack of progress, Lancelot stopped throwing spears and flashed in front of Yasutara with a bearded axe in hand. Chad threw his arms up to defend himself, wincing as the blade bit into his flesh past his shields, and wrestled with the Mad Knight. As the blade of the axe slowly sank into his arms, Jackie appeared and kicked Lancelot in the side of his neck. Thanks to being completely covered in filth from her Fullbring, the attack managed to do enough to send the Quincy tumbling away. "I found Kiriko and he said he finished a new contract," she informed her partner. 30 seconds and time will reset in a small area, 10-meter radius at most, and it can only work on what's not dead. Lancelot rose back up to his feet, wings of pulsing angry swords sprouting from his back, and glared at Jackie. "Think you can risk it?" Chad knew what she was asking, and it certainly was a gamble. If it worked then they had a pretty useful ability and he could be less concerned about the strain of his power, but Giriko would almost certainly have some nasty side effects of his own to deal with. Was it really worth the try, just for one Sternritter? I'm ready when you are, Giriko said, appearing behind Chad and clad in his full bring with a timer ready. Jackie said nothing to the pair as she charged at Lancelot, immediately flowing into series of fast and acrobatic kicks. The Berserker's own speed, durability, and violent unpredictable moves kept him from getting pounded by the Foolbringer's punishing kicks. Arondinct! Lancelot yelled out suddenly, with a sword appearing in a burst of black flame. It was more than just a Reishi construct, like Uriu's bow and Ichigo's blades. This was something far stronger, and the blade was glowing with power. The knight's speed increased suddenly and almost cut Jackie's leg off, leaving a long and deep gash in her thigh. Chad's mind was made up the moment he saw his ally injured. Do it! Chad growled, his hand going to his medallion. Diablo Gigante! Giriko set the timer, a bubble enveloping the area around them, while Chad created his giant avatar. It wasn't the full-sized one that he used against Yemi and was mainly the upper body, but it still dwarfed the Quincy. The moment he noticed its existence, Chad used Bringer Light to accelerate his movements and smashed his devil's fists into the knight. Jackie barely managed to get away just as the giant landed the first blow. Lancelot held his sword up to hold off the massive fist, which left him open for the other three. A Lamu Erd from above, El Directos from the sides, another Lamu Erd from above, and Lancelot dropped from the punishing blows, unable to stop the continued punches and shockwaves. Chad only stopped because he suddenly wasn't in his giant state, immediately dropping as he got a skull-splitting headache. Sato! Jackie called out in concern, rushing to his side to check if he was bleeding. Chad turned to see Giriko, laying on the ground and out, along with Lancelot's mangled body. After a quick check that revealed nothing, Jackie calmed down slightly before going to her other Fullbringer ally. Soon after that, Ririka found them and permitted the lot into her hospital dollhouse that was designed by Anohana and Urahara, where Jackie ran a more thorough test on the pair. Lancelot was kept in a separate dollhouse, meant to preserve samples. Good news or bad first? Jackie asked Chad while Ririka made their getaway. Good. He quickly responded, still wincing from the pain. He felt like he could use some form of good news. The battle was rough enough with just that one Sternritter. Good news is that gamble paid off. She answered. Your soul is still as damaged as it was before you used that technique. No worse and no better. That actually was somewhat good news. The bad news is that Giriko is now in a coma and nothing I've done has woken him up. His soul was heavily strained and his Reishi was almost completely depleted. I don't know if he'll wake up. That was decidedly very bad news. Nothing they could really do other than rest and hope for the best for now. Ririka had to get them out of France before the authorities showed up. They did tear up a street and a few buildings. Saintly hearts. Somewhere in Italy. She hasn't heard much from her friends since they went on the journey, each one keeping to themselves until the agreed time to contact each other and make a report on their Quincy hunts. Though she does miss them all dearly, she knows they are all hard at work with their mission, so she must be as well. She managed to track down an odd concentration of power and energy around Rome and the Vatican, so she's been searching in that area, playing the part of a wide-eyed tourist. However, she still needed a place to stay and she didn't want to stay in a hotel. Instead she came upon an orphanage where she started volunteering at it, helping to take care of the children in it. Okay kids. It's time for lunch. Come on inside. Orium called out to the group of children she was overseeing while the head nun went to speak with one of the priests in the city. Seemed like the folks in the Vatican were interested in some of the children. Orium could sense that some had a power locked away inside of them. One that caught her eye in particular was a young girl with sky blue eyes and blonde hair that she wore with a few ponytails and had her bangs frame her face. Her name was Jean and she was already close to the Onmyoji exorcist. Coming big sis. Jean called out, running in her white sundress with the other kids following close behind. Orium enjoyed this time with the kids. She thought it was good practice for when she and her future sister wives had children of their own. She wouldn't mind leaving the fighting behind to be a mother, and peace could not come soon enough in her opinion. She retreated to the kitchen and brought out the simple meals she had made for the children, when she suddenly felt a strong presence appear. Wordlessly and silently, she had Tsubaki ready himself to strike down whoever and whatever was making its way over to the orphanage. "Hey! What smells so good?" The presence loudly called out as a young teen male appeared. He was dressed similarly to a priest with blonde hair, green eyes, and a teardrop mark on his forehead. "Hey kids, I'm back," he said with a smile, followed soon by a series of excited breaths and cheers as the children rushed to him. "Dulio!" The children cried out as they rushed him. He began to greet them happily and Orium relaxed her own guard, though Tsubaki remained at the ready. "Come on. Big sis made some chokonomiyaki," they said, showing him a chocolate brown pancake covered in fudge and chocolate syrup topped with shredded cabbage. Wordlessly, Dulio grabbed a fork and sliced into it before taking a bite. "So chocolatey," he said in delight, taking another bite from the odd creation. "It feels like I'm eating Hong Kong-style fried noodles as well. How did this work?" he demanded, looking at Orium in wonder. "Just comes out that way," she replied simply, keeping a serene smile. Thus the group enjoyed a nice lunch. Most of the kids went to take naps while Jean wanted to run about a bit more. Orium was washing dishes, and Dulio was helping. "You're really close to the kids, aren't you?" she asked, keeping that smile, while Dulio dropped his own disguised calm. "I am, so I wonder what someone of your power is doing here," he said, his presence getting heavier in a way similar to Ryotsu. "I don't recognize you as a member of the church, but you don't feel like a demon. That leaves the fallen or pagan. You don't feel too malicious, despite that spirit that's watching me. Who are you and what are you doing here?" Orium weighed her options and what she knew of the kid from what she saw, genuine care for the other orphans and the drive to protect them from physical threats as well as emotional ones. That was enough for her to trust him, especially since her already knows that she has power. She still had Shuno and Ayam get ready in case things went south and she needed to reject him entirely. "I'm Orium Inu, and I came here because I felt a spiritual disturbance," she admitted to the church soldier. "This place in particular had some strong energies to it, but they aren't quite what I am looking for. That said, I don't mind being here and helping to look after the children," she said with a smile, making the other exorcist relax. "If that's the case, why not come with me and devote your service to God?" he asked, smiling at the girl. "I'm certain you can find a place among us and we can help you in your task. So long as it's righteous." Orium smiled and was about to turn it down, when a sudden scream alerted the two of them. That was Jean. He realized, concern coloring his voice, as the two ran outside and found nothing. "Jean!" Dulio called out, feeling very scared for the young girl. "That way. Ventus," Orium said, pointing toward a forest before the wind gathered at her feet and shot her forward. Dulio was surprised for a moment before following suit, keeping up with the older girl using his own wind. With Orium's guidance, the pair soon came upon a late middle-aged man in white robes with blue lines that seemed militaristic and rough-looking skin, almost like sandpaper. In his hands was a scared and struggling Jean, desperate to get out of the man's iron grip. "Now calm down, child, soon you will be filled with His Majesty's divine power," he said to the girl while licking his lips. "Don't you want to devote yourself to such a holy task as aiding the Quincy King?" "What's holy about this?" Dulio yelled out as the two landed in front of the pair, both looking at him with a cold and focused glare. "What's divine about kidnapping children and—" "I don't even want to think about what you're planning." Orium wasn't interested in talking. She found her Quincy target and it was time to go to work. "Katanzan-shun," she immediately said, the three sprites of Tsubaki flying around to cut him to pieces, only to stop dead on contact. "What the? Physical attacks can't hurt me." The Quincy laughed hysterically, holding the scared Jean tighter to him. "I'm Sternritter F, the friction. I can make anything immobile by either removing or maxing out friction. Too much, they can't move their feet. Too little, they slip too much." He laughed, lifting Jean and licking her ear and mocking the pair. Jean looked so terrified that Orium's glare turned downright murderous while Dulio got an idea. "Just physical attack then? Something like fire can work?" he asked, surprising both the Quincy and Orium. I guess. But you wouldn't dare dash." Orium, got a fire spirit?" he asked, making the Quincy's eyes widened in recognition of the name while Orium seemed to have caught on. "Ignis, come forth." She summoned, a red light coming from one of her rings before taking humanoid form. "Contain my flames," Dulio said as he held his hand out to the Quincy, causing him to erupt into flames. The sudden fire shocked the Quincy into releasing Jean, who immediately ran to Orium. The spirit concentrated the flames into a sphere around the friction, while Dulio increased the fury of the fire. The cries ended quickly as the Quincy was burned to ash. Jean was now safe, and Orium had a lot to explain. But for now, a crying child needed comfort. There Jean. Big Sis is here," the spirit user said, holding and gently patting the sobbing girl as they made their way back to the orphanage. After an extra sweet snack and a hairstyle makeover, a messy bob with a single thick pigtail braid, Jean joined the other kids for a nap while Dulio was filled in on the Quincy matter. "But it sounds like this Wywak is a parasite. Why do the other Quincy serve him and why do they consider it holy?" he asked after Orium gave him the full story as she knew it. "Why do you consider anything you do for the church to be holy?" she returned, stunning the boy. "Is it because you truly believe in the cause, or because you were told to do so?" He never once thought of it like that. "My enemies are the Quincy, but two of my best friends and trusted allies are Quincy as well. Ones that turned against Wywak. Should they suffer the same judgment as those that serve Wywak despite going against him?" If he applied that train of thought to his life, then what was he doing? As for why they think it, it's because they believe in Wywak. Believe in his mission and end goal. Belief is a powerful thing, and if you control that then you control the people. "I can see that," he admitted as the children woke up from their naps. "Just try to focus on doing the right thing for everyone and not blindly follow," Orium advised as she returned to the children playing with them and making happy memories while Dulio was left to ponder her words. Orium stuck around for a few more days after Jean suddenly began to create blades from nothing but would soon leave to continue her mission. Chapter 93, Night Quincy. With Uriu. The Quincy was not happy at all. How long has he spent in Europe as a whole? Traveling from one country to another, following lead after lead, only to be disappointed with information they already knew, intelligence that was not helpful at all, and no opponent that could give him a proper challenge. For all the hype of dragons in myths and legends, the ones he fought were disappointing. Then again, these were mostly domesticated livestock and not beasts of legends. He was curious of a few names though. Aphis, Albion, and Drake were not names he recognized in any legend. The only other thing that was going his way was his research into the dragons in Reverse London's care and how they could help back home. Unfortunately, spirit energy and whatever it was that resided with the members of Wingbind, the name of Godiai's western counterpart, was not as compatible as he'd like. He did find some dragons that could help with spirit material, but not many, and resources were precious for him. But he did manage to create a very powerful weapon with what he had. He was in a taxi when he pulled out the revolver he made. It was fashioned from material he got from hammerback mineral dragons, thus rendering it invisible to anyone not spiritually aware or not touched by dragons. The gun itself was gleaming silver with a mid-length barrel and a rather hefty chamber, each one holding a Schneider bullet. He was still shocked that he managed to make any of it, but it was still a prototype and in need of real-world combat testing. Maybe Reverse London would send a team of conservation rangers and dragons to Japan and Soul Society to see if it could bring about a positive change. He was brought out of his thoughts when he suddenly sensed a strong presence in the city, the taxi finally reaching London. "Stop the car," the Quincy suddenly ordered, making the driver stop. "Here's £50, keep the change." He quickly ran into an alleyway, getting out of public sight, and used Hiran Kyaku to make his way to where he felt the presence. While moving at high speeds he tried to fine-tune his senses, finding the strongest presence somewhere in the sewers near the Thames and a stronger concentration over at Camden. Deciding to err on caution, he headed for Camden and found 5 cloaked figures surrounding a young girl. "Come on, just grab her and we can be done with this," one of the figures said, sounding agitated and scared. "The sooner we get her back to him, the more likely we can avoid that." They moved and won the young blonde girl, who held a look of defiance in her eyes despite the numbers against her. Uriah felt one of the seal schneiders on his hip before dropping down between the girl and the group. "Is that the traitor?" he heard them yell in anger. "Van den Rijk!" Uriah growled as the figures removed their cloaks, revealing themselves as soldats. The Quincy member of the Soul Reapers tried, for the longest time he could, to avoid killing his own people because he kept telling himself that he could and would eventually bring honor back to the Quincy. If it ever even existed under Wywak, that is. But this? Turning their arms on a young, defenseless girl? That was too much for him to tolerate, and he cut them down faster than they could even react. "Are you all right?" Uriah asked the young girl, his kind smile blocking the view of the 5 soldats falling to the ground dead. "I'm fine, sir," she said, nodding her head. She was a cute blonde girl in a white dress with a black bow and black stockings. "I am grateful for your rescue, and it shows I am lacking in my skills as a knight." Uriah chuckled, finding the sense of innocence in the girl to be adorable. He also kept focusing on the being behind him because even though he cut and pierced vital points on each one, their life forces held strong. "By my honor, as Artoria Pendragon of the esteemed line of King Arthur, I simply must invite you to my home to repay my debt," she declared, surprising the Quincy. The Arthur Pendragon, he thought in amazement. The King of the Knights of the Round Table and King of Camelot. Dozens of thoughts flooded his mind in that instant, various possibilities on the who and the why. Did the Van den Rijk know she was related to King Arthur? What were the odds of actually meeting a member of that illustrious line? What importance does this information have? The best chance of getting his answers would likely come from meeting with the girl's family. "I'm grateful for the offer and would love to come. Just wait a moment," he said as he felt Rishi spike behind him. He quickly grabbed Artoria and flashed out the alley by jumping above the buildings, looking down to see what could only be described as demonic starfish. What are those things?" Artoria shrieked, surprising Uriah by her ability to see the spirit side of things. That or whatever happened to those Quincy was still in the physical plane, and that's far more concerning. "They're dead," Uriah calmly said, activating his Volstandig and shooting a storm of feathers down on the monstrosities before firing a seal Schneider down as well. The silver hilt of the weapon froze in midair while a barrier of highly dense Reishi formed around all the monsters. "Geld shrank," he said, dropping a Reishi-filled Jinto onto the seal Schneider. The barrier shrank and shrank, crushing the demonic starfish before Uriah dropped back down to it and used Raso Tenge to throw it skyward to explode harmlessly. No doubt it would surprise the people of London and likely alert the Sternritter or whoever those soldats answered to, but it was the least likely to have collateral damage if he kept control. "Is it over? Really over?" Artoria asked, holding onto Uriah's sleeve while the Quincy glared at the dissipating smoke. "For now, yes," he told her as she began to lead him to her home. Time skip. It all seemed to pass by in a flash for the Quincy, going to Artoria's house and joining the family for dinner. Artoria was excited to introduce him to her family while also trying to project an air of confidence and strength, kind of reminded him of Ichigo when they were younger. He also met the rest of the Pendragon family, Artoria's twin brother Arthur, little sister Elife, and parents Heldaf and Layla Pendragon. Young Arthur had glasses, wore a business suit on his small frame, and had shoulder-length blonde hair, being more calm and focused than his twin, reminding Uriah of himself. Elife was even smaller, being the youngest child, with shoulder-length blonde curls and dressed in a more witchy aesthetic. "I thank you for delivering my child back home safely," Heldaf said while bearing a regal appearance befitting a king, a deep voice like a lion's roar, a darker shade of blonde with a full beard, and a well-kept but fierce look to him. "Please, join my family for dinner," the man offered with a smile. "It's been ages since we've had any surprise guests," Layla said with a smile. She had long platinum blonde hair, wore a red dress with a red and gold headpiece to hold her long flowing hair. "I'm tempted to cook dessert in celebration. How about chiffon cake?" Both Pendragon daughters seem excited by the news. "But first, we must make sure to wash up. Artoria, Elife, we'll go first." The matriarch took her daughters and went to the washroom. "Been a while since she made a chiffon cake." Heldaff mused with a smile. I now have another reason to thank you, Sir Ishida. Dinner went by quickly, calm but with a sense of guarded concern, with both parents keeping an eye on Artoria. As if the moment they take their eyes off her she'll disappear, much like all the food she was eating. That little girl probably ate enough for half the people at the table. Afterward, Uriah had received a call from Wingbind's Saber squad that said another Quincy was found, defeated, turned into a demonic starfish, defeated again, and was being kept in stasis for him to join in researching later. Good, make sure that thing, at least, stays in one piece. Uriah said as he was finishing the call. I'm not good enough to get anything helpful from contaminated ooze. The call ended as the Quincy looked for Heldaff to announce his goodbyes, as was only decent to do. He searched around the large mansion, heavily decorated in Arthurian lore, before finding the man on a balcony. You're a bit of an enigma to me, Sir Ishida. He said before the Quincy had a chance to say anything, continuing to watch over his family as they played together. Arthur was protecting Queen and Princess from a vicious and adorable saber lion. You are not an exorcist or priest I've ever seen. You don't seem like any angel. Which leaves heroic lineage, either a direct descendant like my family or inheriting the spirit and abilities of the hero in question. He faced Uriah, who was confused but quickly controlled himself to gather as much information as possible. Did you think they were named by chance? Heldaff asked before pointing to the twins. My son inherited the king's skill, my daughter the ambition. My other daughter takes after Morgan Le Fay in terms of magical talent. He pointed to Uriah. But which are you? Are you the legacy of Shiro Amakusa? Attempting to bring Christianity to Japan again? I'm not sure. Uriah answered, evading the question. But I doubt that it matters. What does matter is stopping the people that tried to take away Artoria. Heldaff shifted in place, focusing on the new task instead of the question of what is Uriah. They've only been delayed for now and won't stop until they have Artoria. Time skip. Uriah was not happy, which was starting to seem like the theme of the month. He explained the bare minimum to Heldaff and secured the man's help with hunting and slaying the Vandenreich, and then sent a call to his friends about the heroic legacies. Orium confirmed the story of those heroes, revealing her meeting with Jean and the lieutenant surmising that the girl was indeed Joan of Arc reborn. After that, Uriah was now hunting for his target in earnest. A target that has clearly had time to skirt around discovery and lay plenty of traps. Stronger monsters seemed to be a favorite of the Twisted Freak, and had thus far evaded capture. The Quincy finally had enough when he and Heldaff raided another hideout, finding it riddled with corpses of missing persons from all over the United Kingdom and the monstrosities that this person was so fond of. So he burned it all, set fire to everything and wrote a message for his target as clear as day. Meet me on the Thames. Which brings them to now. Uriah was standing in the middle of the river, the entire city deserted with efforts from Reverse London and the Pendragons, and thus removing any possibilities of innocent bystanders getting caught up in the coming battle. He had his purification cross, his seal Schneiders, his Jinto, and his new revolver holding his Schneider rounds, while the witches and wizards of Wingbind's Saber unit had their dragon steeds and new modified pistols meant to damage whatever this Quincy's monsters were. Any moment now, if his target were to the challenge, then the battle would begin. He closed his eyes and drew a deep breath, sensing a new presence in front of him. So, do I get to have the courtesy of your identity? Uriah asked, opening his eyes to see his enemy. The man had a young face, large and bulbous eyes, shiny pale skin, had combed back black hair, was tall and had a hunch that hid a build worthy of a warrior. He wore heavy black robes with a large cassock around his collar, but the oddest and most haunting item on his person was the book in his hand. The item itself was pulsing with reishi and smelled more foul than anything he had encountered before. The man before him smiled and gave a slight and mocking bow. I would go by Bluebeard, but I don't think I've done enough to live up to the legacy of my forebear. So for now, call me Sternritter M, the monster, he told Uriah as he bore his gaze into the teen. And you would be the traitor, Uriah Ishida. The lieutenant didn't answer the provocation, instead think back to where he heard the name of Bluebeard. Bluebeard, if I remember my history correctly, that was the character inspired by the French knight Gilles de Rais. He said as years of study and schooling replayed in his mind. Yes, My forebear was the very knight you speak of. The stern Ritter said, smiling all the while. A man that worshipped the holy maiden knight, Jeanne d'Arc, and went mad after her execution. His smile turned melancholic as he continued. And those of us that bear his legacy bear that obsession with Jeanne, desperately looking for her in this vast world. Is it to atone for past sins, because we're cursed by this desire to find her, because that knight held such strong feelings for her? I don't entirely know, but I still wish to find her, and someone is getting in my way. He said with a sudden twisted smile to Uriah. And you think she's here in London? The Quincy asked, resolving to not bring up what Orium told him. What's the plan from there? You've already sold yourself away, and I doubt Wywak would allow you to have another master. I can't speak for the others, but I certainly desire our maiden. Bluebeard answered. I want to find her, keep her to myself, protected and away from all that would take her from me. And if she becomes a ripened fruit, I'll pluck her for myself. You intend to rape Joan of Arc? Uriah asked, disgusted by the thought. I truly enjoyed the atrocities committed by Jill, and how better to succeed the man? The stern Ritter asked as shadows beneath them moved unnoticed by Uriah. I care not for restoring his so-called good name. I want to murder and defile as I desire. Daring God to strike me down. He said while throwing his arms to the heavens, Uriah reaching for the gun on his side. I'm not God. He said, activating his bow and wrapping his hand around the butt of his revolver. But I'll be his divine sword. He growled with every intention of killing the Quincy in front of him, when he finally sensed something in the water. As tentacles burst forth from the dark waters below, Uriah flew himself to safety and watched in horror at the abomination that was coming forth. The flesh of the beast was the darkest shades of purple that it was almost black with sickly green lumps all over its endless tentacles, dozens of which were wrapping around the stern Ritter. Uriah Ishida. He called out as something like a giant maw surfaced and slowly swallowed the madman. I'm pleased to have met you. If I bring His Majesty your head, he'd grant me a whole Jagdermi group to hunt down the holy maiden. Now, Uriah the traitor, die so that I may finally accomplish the ambitions of Jill de Rice. He cried out as the monster continued to rise and more tentacle appeared. The main body even looked like a giant squid tentacle. The whole thing was more akin to a Lovecraftian abomination than anything that should rightly exist. Uriah watched on in shock before taking a breath to calm himself. Keep your focus. He told himself as he readied his bow, a solid white and blue four-pronged bow that vibrated with energy. His phone started to vibrate, prompting Uriah to answer it. Hey, you have a plan to kill this thing. Right? He heard Spangle Nai asked, unable to mask her fear. Herself and Noel Nyahashi were promoted to Saber Squad after Uriah brought them along to put down a nest of hidden black dragons and then gave his recommendation. Guess his veteran status as a combatant was respected among the higher-ups of Reverse London. They needed it now more than ever. Our guns were modified to kill those smaller starfish things. Not, whatever that thing is. I might have one. Uriah admitted. Now's as good a time as any to test my Schneider rounds, but I'll need a clean shot. Think the whole of the sabers can whittle that thing down enough for me to find that bastard and all that? We can try. On your mark. She returned as Uriah activated his Volstandig and flew up to the midpoint of the monster's height. He took aim and shouted. Now. He unleashed a barrage of arrows at Bluebeard's monster, flaring his buzzing wings to shred any tentacle that got too close to him. Meanwhile, from all over London, members of Wingbind came flying in on their broom buggy dragons and began shooting at the behemoth. The good news was that the modified weapons were still effective against the creature, blasting off bits and chunks and some managing to sever entire tentacles, but the immediate bad news was that the monster easily and immediately regenerated the damage. It can heal, that puts us at an extreme disadvantage. Uriah thought as he flew about, dodging tentacles and still shooting arrows at the monster. He could sense the massive concentration of Reishi, but there was so much of it that he couldn't pinpoint where in the monster was Jill. No. Help. He heard some of the sabers cry out as they were caught and pulled toward the nightmare creature. Some got freed by other witches and wizards, others were devoured in the mass of flesh which soon grew eyes all over its form and seemed to start moving faster. We're barely making a dent. Uriah thought as the monster continued to regenerate from the attack. And with it healing, I'm starting to doubt we can beat it. He felt the creep of despair climbing up his spine before shaking his head. No. Father and Uncle Ashine made sure to drill determination into our skulls precisely for these kinds of conflicts. Nothing is unkillable, everything has a weakness. He remembered as he tried to focus his senses, scanning to pinpoint where in the monster's body the Stern Ritter might be or, at the very least, the book powering it. Once again, all he got was the fire of the enemy's spirit energy around the massive head. Even when he focused and refined that focus, wait, he saw something. It was small, but it was definitely near the center. I really hope this works, he whispered, getting an idea and flashing above the monstrosity. He pulled out the revolver and took aim, hundreds of tentacles swarming up to devour him. Time slowed to a crawl the moment he fired his shot, the first true test of the Schneider round. The bullet's form was taken from the Rip bullet developed in the United States, held in a Jinto shell that had enough reishi in it to send the bullet for miles with enough penetrative power to go through even the strongest arrow and blunt. The special factor of the bullet is that each fragment could generate a Seal Schneider blade and was connected by Soul Silver nano thread, some of the last he had on hand when coming here, which will cause the fragments to activate and turn it into a whirlwind of blades carving their way through the target. The bullet drilled into the monster's flesh, entering it with ease, and soon erupting into a spiral of destruction. An explosion of gore followed as the blades tore the monster to shreds. The only indicator that his shot was successful was the pained cry of the Stern Ritter. Years of dedicated archery and marksmanship training gave his all the information for his next shot as he flashed in front of the head and fired another shot, the gaping wound from the shot revealing Rice's legacy with several horizontal gashes going from head to toe. The shot now destroyed his book and took his left arm as well, the monster now collapsing and melting into a shower of blood with the catalyst gone. Uriah lowered himself down and caught the Stern Ritter, bringing them to shore for a more thorough interrogation. "Wake up!" Uriah growled, slapping the Van Den Rijk Quincy really hard to make him focus. "You're the legacy of Jill de Rice. Your line has been searching for Jeanne d'Arc for generations. I've met the Pendragon family descended from King Arthur himself. Now tell me, what other legacies are there and which ones are already part of the Van Den Rijk?" The lieutenant demanded before a tentacle suddenly wrapped around his neck. "You think, that after everything you've done, that I would answer you?" Jill roared, revealing the tentacle that was tightening around Uriah's throat was connected to what was his left arm. "Traitor Ishida, the Quincy that turned his back on his own family, my desire was to find the Holy Virgin. You've denied me that, so I'll take your dash." He stopped as his tentacle was chopped off and was suddenly electrocuted. "I'll be taking this," Uriah heard someone say, and his neck was released and Jill collapsed from the sudden jolts of electricity surging through his body. The person was a blonde woman with a single long braided ponytail and dressed like a business secretary with a hefty suitcase. She effortlessly handled Rice's body as she proceeded to stuff him into the suitcase. "Nemu? Is that you?" Uriah asked, prompting the woman to look at Uriah and slowly shift into the familiar form that Uriah was used to seeing. "New Jigai? Yes, experimental and the only one of its kind," she admitted as she returned to the blonde and flat secretary. "Research into Jigai has accelerated greatly, despite a couple hiccups along the way. Anyway, I have a mission here. Need to recover all samples and research you've completed." She then looked to the now bloodied Thames River. "Maybe I can help with the cleanup." Chapter 94, Warriors of the Sun. With Tatsuki. "Okay, yeah, maybe you should have talked about this as soon as it was resolved, Orium," the fiery martial artist said in the conference call with her comrades from around the world. "Me? Oh yeah, I did forget to mention this. I'm getting trained by Sun Wukong. Yes, Uriah, that Sun Wukong. Apparently there's more to the world than we thought. No, he's not going to help us fight, it apparently breaks some rules. All he can do is teach me a few things I can bring back. So that's the plan for now? 'Kay. I'll check for anything in India, we're heading there anyway. Talk to you soon." She finished before hanging up her phone, turning to the famous monkey demon that was patiently waiting for her to finish. "So, what's the plan you and your friends cooked up?" he asked, taking a drag from his pipe. "The Van Den Rijk seemed to be targeting people with heroic pedigrees," she answered, "or that's what it seemed like. So far seems to only be from the Christian influence, but it's the best lead we have on who and what they're targeting. Any notable Indian heroes? Tatsuki asked, making the monkey stroke his beard in thought. Well, there is this one guy my boss really respected. Wukong admitted. The latest heir should be an adult or in his late teens by now. There's no way he'd join the Quincy though, his rival on the other hand. He trailed off before shaking his head. We'll deal with that when we get there. For now, back to training. Get your weights on, girl. She nodded and set about putting on ankle and wrist bands that the monkey enchanted to grow heavier as she gets stronger so that she's always pushing herself. This process ended with Wukong transforming into a monkey and latching onto her back. NGH. I know my weights are supposed to get heavier, but are you sure you're not putting on a few pounds, monkey? Tatsuki asked as she began jogging, focusing on drawing out her life force to power her movements. Their current location was in the Sichuan province of central China and Wukong was forcing Tatsuki to make her way to India on foot, using the intense physical act to make her draw out the power of Toki. The journey lasted for a couple weeks, managing speed techniques helps out greatly, before they actually reached the country. Her training was to run all day with heavy weights, occasionally striking a thick tree or large boulder into powder when the monkey ordered it, to sparring all night with Sun being particularly rough with the girl. Not even her shunko gave her much help against him. Tatsuki only ever got 2 hours of sleep, one at dawn and the other at dusk. Her body was, oddly enough, mostly recovered after each hour and Sun had her repeat the process till they got to India while pushing her further every day. Well, here we are. Sun announced after they finally crossed the border, Tatsuki continuing to run as fast as she could. She managed to avoid any border agents and kept charging deeper into the nation. Now, to find the latest descendant of Karna. I think he even has the same name. And that is? Tatsuki asked, still running because Sun cracked her skull the last time she slowed down. He was a demigod son of Surya, Hindu sun god, hero of charity, and one of the few people my boss respects. Sun answered, tapping Tatsuki to signal her to stop. He's an albino, the white hair, pale skin, but his eyes are blue. There should be a red gem in his chest, he wields a golden spear and should have golden armor. A little edgy, if I'm being honest. He described, slipping off her back and transforming back into his more human form. Also a master fire user, so he could help you there. Now to find him. He scanned the distance, trying to sense some kind of trace of their target. The pair soon felt a great disturbances in the spirit energy around them, originating a few more miles to the south. Think that's him? Tatsuki asked as they charged on, heading for what may be their best lead. What they came upon was a most fearsome duel, a man in a black form-fitting bodysuit that Sun described as Karna fighting furiously against a dark brown-colored man in what seemed like white Quincy robes, taking a more colorful floral tone near the bottom, a large metal case at his side, and a large bow with a string of blue and an odd claw-like protrusion on the body. Possibly what he shoots his arrows out of. That's definitely Karna, and Arjuna. Sun sighed out. They hate each other. Arjuna drew his bow and aimed at Karna, releasing several energy shots and signaling the other archers to do the same. Karna's skill with his spear was immediately apparent as he dodged and deflected many of the spirit arrows. Many, but not all, as Arjuna kept up a ferocious attack and sent a bolt clean through one of Karna's arms. And the Quincy got to him. We need to help. Sun said as they assembled archers took aim again. I'll take the small fry. Ignite, Hidari. Tatsuki quickly said before flashing to one of the soldats and slamming her armored heel into the side of his head. The Quincy in question was sent flying into one of his comrades as a fireball. This surprised the rest of the soldats and Tatsuki, taking advantage of the sudden shock, got to work. She flashed about the battlefield, moving like a comet, and striking each of the soldats as fast as she could with each one flying away like fireballs from her hits. With all the Quincy down, she flashed in front of Karna. You alright, big guy? The albino's own surprise passed as he looked at the girl that came to his aid. Yes, thank you. He said calmly while scanning Tatsuki with an analytical eye. But I must ask, who are you? Tatsuki remembered that Sun warned her to be truthful with Karna. People of that bloodline were terrifyingly good at spotting liars, but it never mattered with her since she's never liked lying anyway. "Name's Tatsuki Arisawa," she answered, "and I'm here to recruit you to fight for the sake of the world." Karna saw one of the downed Quincy moving. "I can explain more, but first we need to get you dash." The demigod threw her aside just as the soldat fired a shot that nailed him in the stomach, piercing through his flesh with ease. "Karna!" The man grunted, but stayed standing, gripping his lance tightly as the area around him grew hotter. "Arisawa, are you fireproof?" he suddenly asked as Tatsuki finally noticed the temperature changed, some of the soldats already trying to escape. "I'm resistant enough," she answered as Karna exploded into fire, frying several of the Quincy. That's a little more than I can do," the martial artist admitted in shock as the fire died down, smoldering bits here and there, but Karna was still badly injured and dropped to his knees. "Karna!" Tatsuki called out in concern, unsure of what to do since she was a fighter and not a medic. Thankfully, Sun was on them in seconds and he seemed to know what he was doing. "All right, let's patch you up first," he said, his hand glowing white as he placed it over Karna's wound. Tatsuki was impressed to see the 2 holes sealing up and came to a quick conclusion. "Is this why you've been able to keep running me ragged despite everything you've had me do?" she asked as Gaku finished his healing. "It's called Senjutsu and it can do far more than just heal Tatsuki," he answered as he and Karna stood up. "It is controlling the flow and energy of one's life force to do things much like how Shinigami use their Reishi for Kido. Anyone that learns Senjutsu can use Toki, but it's faster to teach you a skill you are more familiar with than to train you in an entirely new skill set. Now then, where is your armor, Karna?" the monkey asked of the demigod, who looked rather irritated by the loss of said armor. "That coward Arjuna had it stolen while I bathed," the albino answered. "Then he attacked me with those weird archers. I'm surprised he even allowed me the chance to get dressed. Now my question, what fight and why me? We'll explain as we move," Sun quickly said, turning back to a monkey and jumping onto Tatsuki's back. "I've got a mountain we can regroup at. Move, Tatsuki. You've still got your weights on, girl," he ordered, smacking her into running. Karna shrugged his shoulders before joining his new allies. Wukong's mountain. So there is a war brewing between the groups of the Soul Society and Vandenreich, Shinigami, and Quincy, and instead of keeping it between your 2 groups, the Quincy are recruiting around the world while your side seek to either stop them or recruit your own allies. All the while, strengthening yourselves during your travels. Karna surmised from what Tatsuki told him, getting a nod from the martial artist. And as for the fate of the world part, the leader of the Quincy is planning to do something that will cause the world to collapse and destroy itself unless he is stopped. That is the case, Tatsuki admitted before pointing at Gaku. And since, from what this monkey told me, other great powers from around the world avoid getting involved in each other's affairs, we need to deal with this ourselves. But that doesn't mean you can't lend your help. Karna thought it over, judging the situation for himself. From the looks of it, Arjuna joined the opposite side of the people that came to him. Arjuna joined a side that aims to destroy the world. Was it just to kill him? Was the hate between the demigod lines of Arjuna and Karna this dedicated to ending the other? Arjuna said he was now a stern ritter. The fire master said, surprising Tatsuki before she sighed in exasperation. Stern rittery, what does that mean? Why Whack, the king of the Quincy, can empower those that drink his blood with his own soul. She explained, going off what she knew of the mechanics of the matter. Doing so allows him to carve a letter into your own soul and that letter grants you greater powers, always connected to a word that starts with that letter. He could link to any number of things and any number of powers, but the power isn't a gift. It's a loan and paying it back means your life. He absorbs your soul. The weight in the room felt physically heavy as Tatsuki revealed the fate that awaited Arjuna. So no matter what, Arjuna will die. Karna sighed, making his decision. This has always been between me and him, and now he threw that away for what? A better chance at beating me? I will side with the Soul Reapers, but on 2 conditions. 1. I want my armor back. Arjuna has it and I will not suffer his possession of my armor. I may be the hero of charity, but not to him. 2. Arjuna is mine. No one else can kill him. Tatsuki nodded in understanding. I'll help you get your armor, but I can't promise anything with Arjuna if you don't kill him here, she admitted, standing up and holding out her hand to shake. I'm told the battlefield can be pretty chaotic. Then we have a deal, Karna said, taking her hand and shaking it. Now, for Arjuna's base. Arjuna's home. It was the next day when they assaulted Arjuna's home, a beautiful villa in the middle of nowhere that was immaculately designed with much artwork of a beautiful man with a bow and a four-armed figure atop an elephant. Sun said that Arjuna was also the spiritual descendant of Indra, but selling his soul to the Quincy would drop him out of the gods' favor so they could continue without worry. The plan was that Karna would fight Arjuna, both Sun and the demigod, claiming that Arjuna was never a match for him without outside help and the power of the Quincy wouldn't make a difference. While that was going on, Sun would work on recovering Karna's golden armor and Tatsuki would keep any other Quincy occupied. It was simple: go in, ransack the place, steal a golden suit of armor, maybe kill someone if Karna could, and Soul Society would have a reliable ally. Come on, you pricks! Tatsuki roared as she threw fireballs at a mass of Quincy. The attack on the compound went as such. Karna and Tatsuki launched the equivalent of an artillery strike since the whole base was filled with a battalion of Quincy. The strike lured Arjuna and the others out, with Karna immediately gunning for Arjuna and dragging him away from his allies and leaving Tatsuki with roughly 50 soldats as her opponents. Meanwhile, Sun infiltrated the house and began searching for the armor. Get out of my way, I'm getting that armor, she shouted, throwing a kick with a trail of fire burning away a barrage of spirit arrows. Sun and Karna suspected that they'd prioritize protecting Karna's armor since he was nigh invulnerable with it on. She began flashing around the battlefield as more and more Quincy converged on her position, many shooting arrows, but some were deciding to take a more direct approach with more melee-oriented weapons. It was only Tatsuki's speed and agility that allowed her to keep flying around the battlefield and avoid any damaging hits beyond a few scratches and scraps, but that was starting to wear out. Wukong never let her take the weights off, even now. The point of this training is to put you so close to the brink of death and so often that you become intimately familiar with the sense of life energy within yourself. She remembered Sun Wukong telling her when they started her training. Until you can harness that power, those weights don't come off. She did feel something when he left her as a broken and bleeding wreck the 10th time they sparred, and she spent every day trying to get that feeling back. Trying to focus on that and the ever-increasing weight on her body as they grew heavier was a sufficient distraction that ended with her getting shot through her leg. Crap! She cursed as she slipped, twisted her ankle, and tumbled across the ground before slamming against a statue of an archer. She tried to get up, but the statue itself soon collapsed and fell on her, burying her in the rubble. The Quincy were pragmatic enough to not simply assume her dead and stuck around, watching and waiting with their bows at the ready. Tatsuki herself felt oddly warm. It was a sensation that was only slightly different from her own spiritual fires, but familiar. The same sensation when she nearly died to Sun's brutal sparring. Either this is that life energy Toki is from, or I'm dying, she thought as she felt out that energy, feeling it wrap around her body like a soothing flame. It does feel like Shunko, she thought before pushing herself to her feet, all the rubble flying off her body with explosive force. That was the signal for the Quincy as they released a barrage of arrows at her. To Tatsuki, the spirit missiles moved slowly as her senses went into overdrive. She barely felt herself move as she suddenly flashed into the center of the Quincy, her fist raised high for a move she hasn't used in a while. Funka! She said before punching the ground, creating a deep crater that was soon engulfed in a bubble of flame before turning into a tornado of fire. The result of Tatsuki putting in more energy into that attack than she ever had before. Run! One among the soldats cried out as he tried to run, not even making it 5 steps before Tatsuki burst from the flames and decapitated him with a kick. The other survivors got over their own shock to attempt to run, and many were met with similar lethal strikes to their person by the empowered girl. Ha! She cried out, sending out massive fireballs at the fleeing targets. See that, you old monkey! I think I got it. She then felt a hand on her head. Yes, you did. Time to sleep, she heard before blacking out, Sun catching her with the gold armor in hand. Now, let's heal you up so you can still move when you wake up, he said as he gently laid her down, her skin bruising all over from internal bleeding. Pretty much all of your muscles got ripped up from activating that technique. This is going to take me longer than an hour to patch up. The monkey sighed, immediately getting to work as all the surviving Quincy fled. Another 5 minutes later and Karna reappeared in front of him, slightly injured but nothing too serious. So, what happened? I learned of his power, and then the coward fled. Karna said, picking up his golden armor, not full plate armor. It seemed to cover his arms and legs with a spiked collar and red fur mane with 2 floating plates. He began placing on his body and the metal seemed to fuse to him, giving a sense of divine radiance. He called it the endowed and it looks like it healed him. He stayed silent for a moment, looking at the resting Tatsuki. The power of Waiwak is a frightening thing, but I will not lose to him. I will fight for Soul Society in this war. I will kill Arjuna. Chapter 95, Aegean Anarchy. With Chad and Jackie. I'll see to it that they get back to Soul Society. Nimue said in her chameleon jigai, carefully placing the travel dollhouse they've been using into her carrying case. Giriko still hasn't woken up from when they were in France and they figured it was time he get some real medical attention since none of the Fullbringers had any themselves. Ririko was going with them since she's the only one that could control the dollhouses. Again, I apologize for being so late, but I didn't have sex with my boyfriend for a couple months and I was thirsty. I know the feeling. Jackie mumbled, looking at Chad. Big guy here is too much of a Boy Scout. I'm still considered a minor. Chad defended, feeling slightly embarrassed by the turn of the conversation. Yeah. She went on to mumble about age of consent and how they were both legal by Japan's laws, but not the United States, where Jackie came from. Anyway, thanks for this guide on Greek mythology. She said to Nimue, who nodded. Considering what Uriah reported a while back, it only made sense. The artificial soul said as she finished packing. You decided to head back towards Greece, which is where some of the most famous heroes came from. If there were legacies of Joan of Arc, King Arthur, and even Gilles de Rais, who knows how many are from the Greek world. Plus, there's more than heroes out there, so watch yourselves. She picked up her case and opened a special Senkaimon gate. By the way, Orium says hello. She's heading for the Celtic lands. And just like that, Nimue left through the gate. Chad and Jackie continued on their way, backpacking and camping their way to Greece on foot. There was little training they could do to strengthen their fullbrings, but they did whatever they could. Racing, sparring, anything that could enhance their skills and abilities as they made their way across the land. Rare was the day when one of them wasn't tired from training, trying to push themselves to their physical and spiritual limits. Days and weeks passed as they entered and continued through the land Greece, keeping an eye out for any evidence on Quincy in the area. They finally got a sense of a strong spirit, several of them, when they were traveling in Thessaly. Says here that Mount Pelion was the home of the centaur Chiron, the trainer of heroes. Jackie said, looking them the guidebook when they started searching the mountain. Also says here that he was poisoned, gave up his immortality, died and joined the gods of Olympus. So if he's dead, who's occupying that area of the mountain? Chad asked as they continued to follow the Rishi of whatever was up there. His replacement. Either way, Chiron trained most of the great heroes and most of those people left kids behind. This might be a gold mine of potential for the Vandenrijk if they successfully find any of them. They continued on before sensing something in the mountain trees. And now we're being hunted. Jackie said in a whisper, both Chad and her getting ready for a fight. Clean bubble. Jackie activated her defensive fullbring, focusing on good and happy memories to keep them in her impenetrable shield. They continued up the mountain, keeping mindful of the being following them, and roughly 2 hours later they reached a dead end. A cave the size of a small apartment, good for escaping weather but not much else. The trail ends here, but it doesn't seem to actually lead anywhere. Chad said, leaving Jackie's bubble to further analyze the stone. This whole area seems to be filled with some kind of energy. He raised a hand and pushed forward, sinking into the rock like it was smoke. Illusions, of course. He jumped back into Jackie's bubble and yelled out to whoever. We know you're hiding. I ask that you reveal yourselves. We're not your enemies. That goes for you too, whoever was following us from the midpoint on this mountain. Jackie yelled back, hearing the leaves rustle with agitated movement which was followed by a figure dropping from the trees. It's a relief to hear you call yourselves peaceful. They heard a calm and collected voice speak as a man wearing a white and blue tunic with leather armor appeared, with long brown hair that reached his lower back and riding a brown horse. At least, they thought that at first before recognizing the horse's head was the man's body. I am known as Chiron, and I welcome you, he announced, shocking the two Fullbringers. Inside Chiron's home, they entered through the illusion to find a shining Greek temple with statues of what could be assumed to be ancient heroes holding up the roof, wide and open space where someone twice Chad's size could move around in comfort, a hunter camp on one side with a deer being drained of blood and a small farm on the other side with a couple goats and some chickens. Deeper inside was a library filled with books and scrolls, many bedrooms, a large bath, and all with dozens of braziers in an opening in the top of the mountain. The group sat in what could be considered as the commons area with a platter of bread, cheese, fruits, milk, and tea. Across the Fullbringers was the mythical trainer of Greek heroes, calmly drinking his tea, while a girl dressed in green and black with feline ears and a tail pulled along a man with spiky blonde hair and silver armor with an orange cloth by his ear. For the last time, Achilles, no one wants a cake that we don't have time for and your baking skills are atrocious, the girl said as they stood at Chiron's side, though she was glaring at the Fullbringers. Atlanta, be nice to your brother, the centaur lightly scolded before smiling at Chad and Jackie. Sorry for the lack of a proper spread, I wasn't expecting guests. I am Chiron, as I've said, these are my students and adopted children, Atlanta and Achilles. The pair nodded at their respective names. Are they of the ancient heroes' bloodline, reincarnations, or just random people that were named after said heroes? Jackie asked before she could stop herself, the Greeks subtly becoming more guarded as a result of the question. Sorry for the sudden question from my friend, Chad immediately said, trying to defuse the situation. We have to ask that because we've encountered other heroes that were under attack or falling into a villain's hands. My name is Yasutura Sato, she's Jackie Tristan, and we're facing a war where our enemy is trying to gather other heroes. Are you recruiting then? Achilles suddenly asked, smirking confidently and excitedly. Because, if so, you can count me in. His enthusiasm surprised the Fullbringers, since they weren't expecting it to be this easy. Then Chiron chopped his son on the head. Achilles, don't be so eager to join a war you have nothing to gain from, the centaur scolded. I've taught you to be a warrior, but a smart and wise warrior. Neither of which suggest you jump headfirst into battle recklessly. But why train us if we have nothing to fight? Achilles countered the point his teacher made. I'm not jumping into a battle, I'm volunteering for a war that is still being prepared. I'm certain they'd tell me everything I know, and I doubt it would serve anyone if people like us stayed on the sidelines. Besides, he turned to Jackie and Chad, the big guy doesn't seem like a bad person. Am I right in assuming that you aren't native to Greece? That this war might threaten the whole of the world? The pair nodded. Then you can count me in, Achilles said with a smile. Chiron could only sigh in annoyance. Could you explain how you were able to track me and how I can prevent that from happening again? Atlanta suddenly said, gaining everyone's attention. Do that, and I'll fight for your side as well. Chiron's irritation and parental concern was exasperated by Atlanta's declaration, something she noticed. I'm a huntress teacher, I'm at my best when no one can sense me. They sensed me the moment I started stalking them and they were prepared. If what they say is true, then I need to be ready. Stubborn, Chiron sighed, just like the originals. And to answer your questions from earlier, Ms. Tristan, they are indeed the reincarnations of Achilles and Atlanta. Atlanta still bears a part of the curse that turned the original into a lion, making her more feline, but she uses it to perfect her hunting ability. Achilles is also a blood descendant that is the reincarnation of his ancestor, but his curse was changed into having enhanced durability instead of nigh invulnerability. I found both as abandoned babes on my mountain and took them both in as my children, and trained them as is my duty as the legendary teacher. If you want my children to aid you, I'll need to see how you measure up as heroes yourselves. Of course. Both Fullbringers said, Chad being sincere while Jackie mumbled under her breath. Anything else before we begin? Who are your opponents? The centaur asked. If they're going to attack, we should know how to identify them. Of course. Chad said while Jackie fished something out of her backpack. Our enemies are called Quincy, humans that have learned to manipulate ambient spirit energy to use as weapons. He told them about the history that led to the First War and near genocide of the Quincy, the circumstances of their return, the dangers they presented, and the threat of Waiwak. They are best identified by the five-pointed cross that is their symbol. At that, Atlanta's cat ears perked up. Five-pointed cross. She asked for clarification. Would they also be wearing white military uniforms? Because I think I saw some of them before. Chad and Jackie froze as the news hit them. Show us where. Hidden Cove. Atlanta took the group down to where she first saw the suspected Quincy appearance, not really concerned since she thought they were simple tourists. Once there, they found what could only be described as a smuggling operation with nearly 100 Quincy. They watched as Van Denryck hauled around crates and cages full of Greek monsters, moving around a short Greek bireme ship bearing no visible symbol aside from a near-invisible Quincy cross on the sail. Shock gave way to other emotions as Achilles looked eager for combat. Atlanta and Chiron were more cautious as they studied the area, while Chad and Jackie tried to keep everyone's heads down. I should have come back sooner. Atlanta cursed as she passed a pair of binoculars to Chiron. There were only a few at first, but I thought it wasn't an issue. Guess I was wrong. One of the cages shook furiously, a Quincy shooting the being inside with a spirit bow which only served to anger the occupant. Poachers. How disgraceful. The cage burst open with a Cyclops breaking out, roaring in anger at his treatment. An anger that was short-lived when a spear pierced through its head directly from the eye, casually thrown by a man with round glasses that was clearly the leader of the group. A stern ritter. Chad cursed, remembering his last encounter with one of the Quincy elite. The stern ritter in question now looked like a cold and unfeeling officer of the army, one that seems more content with just killing everything in front of him that isn't worth converting to a Quincy. This is bad. He looked around to find a way to get closer and get more information when he saw Atlanta notching her bow. Stop. He whispered harshly. Stern ritters are elite soldiers with special abilities. Jackie quickly explained. If you jump in recklessly, the only result will be your death. Especially since you can't hide your presence to them yet. The archer growled in frustration at their current helplessness before noticing something odd. Is that Jason? Atlanta asked, spying a blond man in a white and blue tunic with orange cloth around his waist. Definitely connected to the original Jason, but why is he involved? You said they're gathering heroes themselves, but Jason was completely useless as a fighter. But he still led the other heroes of the Argonauts. Atlanta. Chiron reminded the girl. And a silver tongue can be more dangerous than any sword or spear. I'll get in close and try to listen, be ready to flee if I get captured. The centaur descended further down the way to close in on the Quincy, Chad, and the others keeping an eye on him and the Quincy just in case they needed to move. Tense minutes passed with the only notable change being Chiron losing his horse form for more mobility before he returned, bearing a look of calm fury. We have 1 week. Let's get ready. Back at Chiron's temple. Day 1. The group threw themselves into training themselves in preparation to attack the cove and the Quincy inside. What had Chiron so on edge was the news he heard from Jason and the stern ritter, Quiljopi. The news was that Jason was attempting to sell out other Greek heroes to the Quincy, and any number of them would be dangerous to have as enemies. The question was, which hero would be the target? He wanted to keep an eye on the cove, but the group needed training. However, Chiron was the best teacher in all of Greece for a reason. Achilles and Chad were to spar while Jackie taught Atlanta how to control her Ryotsu as the Fullbringer called it. You've definitely got strength, Sato. The Greek warrior said, but you're lacking in speed and technique. They were trading quick blows, both dodging and deflecting attacks while getting a gauge of their abilities. Like so. He quickly caught onto Chad's arm and got it into a lock, making his side vulnerable to any assault. I don't know what martial arts they have in your Soul Society, but I suggest you pick up something. Achilles let go as they restarted their stance for another round, the warrior smiling confidently. Suddenly Chad was in front of him, almost like he teleported, with his hand just hovering an inch away from his body. I'll admit, I am lacking in that regard. The Fullbringer admitted, rubbing his joints from the stress of using bringer light to move that fast. As you can tell, power is my strong suit over technique, and I'm not exactly the fastest. In fact, my martial arts training as a whole was barely longer than a year before I devoted myself to training and understanding my own specific powers. Everything else was making sure I was strong and durable enough to keep up. Achilles felt himself smile, the sudden ferocity of the attack making his blood boil for combat, but he held himself. I can help you learn pancration. It might help, he suggested as they resumed their spar. Atlanta's training into sensing Reishi was not going as well. Don't use your hearing, Jackie scolded, moving too fast for Atlanta to react thanks to her dirty boots and kicking the girl in the gut. You're trying to see the spirit of a person. The huntress was blindfolded but was still able to dodge, after a few punishing kicks from the Fullbringer, thanks to her trained hearing. Now, Jackie upped both her speed and her force so that Atlanta was too slow to react. If you don't catch up, you're going to end up dead, she warned as Atlanta forced herself back to her feet. Again, the huntress demanded. Day 4. Since souls grow in power rapidly in response to near-death experiences, Atlanta managed to gain the ability to see spirits and sense Ryotsu after being brought to the brink of death for an entire day. After that was a matter of learning how to control her Ryotsu so that she wouldn't be exposed when she took over spying on the cove, which was much easier than getting beaten to near death. With that skill under her belt, she and Jackie went to the cove and had Chiron return to the temple. Chad and Achilles now sparred in pancration, which the centaur was overseeing before deciding it was time for a break. Enough, Chiron gently called out after Chad put Achilles in a shoulder lock, the two disengaging from each other. Achilles, go get some water. Chad, I'm curious about your Fullbring abilities. Mind if we talk about them? Achilles went about getting the water while Chad and Chiron left the temple. Basically, how they work, the Fullbringer asked as they walked into the outside, Chiron nodding and waiting. Fullbring is the basic ability of pulling on an object's soul, something anything has, and we can manipulate that in certain ways. My increased speed is from bringer light, which is pulling on the soul of the ground or air to accelerate my movements. Fullbringers also access their own respective abilities from something they have a strong attachment to and mixes its soul with their own to gain those abilities. Jackie loves her boots and her memories with them influence their abilities. For me, it's my arms and my pendant, he said, grasping his medallion. I've always had great strength in them, and this medallion is the representation of my promise to my grandfather and best friend. Do you only take pride in your arms? Chiron suddenly asked, getting Sato's attention. I understand taking pride in the strength of your arms, but what about the rest of your body? Do you not have any pride in your legs or your torso? You have great strength in your whole body, Chad, so why does it only cover your arms? Chad looked at his figure and wondered that very question. Day 6. So, I've been wondering. Chad started as he and Achilles entered the baths of the temple. What's it like being the reincarnation of the Achilles? The Fullbringer asked the hero, who took a moment to think about it. Honestly, sometimes it feels like there's a voice in my head giving me advice, Achilles admitted before chuckling. Problem is, that voice doesn't have any advice beyond fighting. So, guess that voice is pretty much pointless. The two shared a laugh before the frantic voice of Atlanta broke them out of it. Everyone assemble. Now. They heard her call out, prompting the two to get out and get dressed. They just got their first real victim, and it was Medea, she said as they appeared in old-fashioned Greek tunics, Chiron next to the huntress as he made the map. Must her fate be to suffer because of that bastard Jason again? She growled, her former life's anger at her former comrade rising to the surface. Stay calm, Atlanta, Chiron ordered, control your anger, don't let it control you. He finished drawing the map and faced the assembled group. The story of Medea bears a legacy of magic, heartbreak, and betrayal. The original Medea was charmed by Aphrodite to betray her family and country for the sake of Jason, a man she's never met before, and was tossed aside in favor of another princess. She herself had so much potential that Hecate herself taught the princess magic. Her reincarnation is undoubtedly as skilled as her original self and would be a great asset to any side that had her. Atlanta, what is the current situation at the Cove? Several hellhounds, a couple of Cerberus, a few Cyclopes and Minotaurs, a Chimera, and it seems like the Caledonian boar was reborn as well. The huntress reported, turning to the Fullbringers. That boar is mine, the original Atlanta killed it and now it is my turn. A few grunts from Chiron brought the girl's focus back as she continued the report. A couple dozen Quincy and Jason himself, but no Sternritters. The Sternritter from earlier is supposed to appear at noon for pickup. Then we'll attack at first light. Chiron decided. Achilles, Chad, Jackie, the three of you will free the monsters and attack the Quincy. In the confusion, Atlanta and I will recover Medea, then Atlanta will join you in destroying the monsters. Get some sleep and be ready. Hidden Cove. They moved silently, racing down to the smugglers' base and readying their assault. Chiron and Atlanta made their way to the cave where Jason had the best prizes while Chad, Jackie, and Achilles circled the perimeter. Achilles had his spear and shield while Jackie and Chad had their full brings ready, prepared for the eventual battle to come. The sun started to rise, setting the ocean on fire, when Chad and Jackie began to move. The two Fullbringers blurred out of sight, smashing locks and hinges on cages to release the many monsters, unleashing the beasts on the Quincy. The animals are free. The animals are free. One of them yelled out as the monsters charged out and began wreaking havoc. A Cyclopes charged out and smashed a Quincy underfoot before bellowing out a loud roar, followed by the rest of the monsters attacking. In the confusion, Achilles charged out with a smirk as he indulged in battle. Come on. Is this all you've got? He challenged, running a couple Quincy through before throwing the bodies into the water and turning it red with blood. I had higher expectations. He continued on while fighting both Quincy and Greek monsters. He's not wrong. These guys are far weaker than the ones we originally saw here. Chad thought, fighting through the crowds of Quincy and monsters. Something's off. He quickly grabbed a random Quincy and jumped away from the fight, standing on the water, holding his victim by the throat. Where's the Sternritter? Sato demanded, painfully squeezing but not choking his target. SS Sir Quilge, not here. The Quincy managed to gasp out while Chad continued to crush him in his hand. T took Jagdar me, unit, and L left. G gave Jason, 1 week to get results. So you're only soldats? Chad asked, getting a nod from the Quincy. Good. He quickly snapped the soldier's neck, a far easier end than anyone else would give him, before turning back to the chaos that was unfolding. Now's as good a time as any to test this. His Reishi engulfed his whole being before it quickly shifted into his Diablo Gigante, only wrapping around his body like an armor. Okay, not dying. That's good. He kicked off the water and charged back into the fray, smashing through everything before punching a crater into a rock wall. Still new to this. He ripped his hand free and dodged as a bull-headed figure charged at him. Let's do this, he said, accepting the challenge. With Chiron. The centaur and huntress moved the moment they heard the first scream, bolting into the cave while others rushed about in the frenzy. Atlanta even found the cages of the Chimera and Caledonian boar, shooting out the locks with her arrows and freeing the beasts within. Lucky for them, the animals were more interested in revenge against their Quincy captors than the pair going further into the cave. They soon heard the sounds of crying and irritation. What the hell is happening out there? Atlanta scowled upon hearing and recognizing that particular voice, a tone of arrogance that wrung back from bygone days. I told that Quincy fool to leave some elite troops. Not until you produce results. Well, now you'll lose some good product. At least I'll get to keep you out of my hair. I didn't want anything to do with you. A voice full of fear, innocence, and sorrow cried out. But you just can't stop torturing me, can you? Chiron and Atlanta nodded to each other as they went further in, watching as Jason tried to drag a cage onto the bireme from earlier, which held a young girl inside. Medea. Atlanta whispered in recognition of the young girl. She wore a lavender-purple gown, had lavender-colored hair in a ponytail that reached her lower back, and it was covered in dirt and mud from less than gentle treatment. The huntresses wasted no more time as she charged forward and tackled Jason, knocking him away from Medea's cage, which was caught by Chiron. "Hey Captain! Remember me?" That will be quite the unpleasant experience for him, the teacher said as Medea tried to crawl away inside the cage. "It's going to be all right. You have nothing to be afraid of anymore." She still looked apprehensive of the centaur. You're not here to kill me?" she asked, disbelieving anyone or anything would help the infamous witch, even if she was technically a clean slate due to reincarnation. "We're here to help. Come child," Chiron gently said, interrupted by screams of agony. All from Jason. "That's not supposed to bend that way," he cried out. "That's not supposed to bend that A scream that followed a sickening crunch that sounded like bones getting broken. "Now it does," Atlanta calmly said. "Isn't that nice?" She soon made her way to the cage. "I wish we could meet under better circumstances, Medea." "Atlanta? Is that really you?" the young spellcaster asked, earning a smile and a nod from the huntress. "Master, get her out of here," Atlanta said as she turned back to Chiron. "I'm going to help the others slay all the monsters. We can't afford to let any of them run loose." Without waiting for a response, the huntress ran off to begin her hunt. In the middle of the cove, chaos reigned in the cove. All the skeleton crew of Quincy smugglers were dead and so were many of the beasts. Chad was wrestling with a minotaur twice his size, Achilles was battling the chimera, Atlanta was fighting alongside Jackie after shooting her arrow directly into the Caledonian boar's eye and brain, all while Chiron took Medea to safety. The young spellcaster took that option, but only after spending some time kicking Jason in the family jewels. Meanwhile, Chad's training shone through as he dominated the fight with the bull monster. The beast had the greater size, but Chad had the greater strength and speed. He grappled with the bull as it charged at him before twisting under it and throwing the beast over his shoulder. The minotaur landed head first, horns breaking off from the impact, before Chad Spartan kicked the beast in the gut and sending him flying into the rock face. "Makes this quick," Chad whispered to himself, generating a large spirit construct of his fist. He threw his punch and smashed it into the minotaur, reducing the beast to paste. With that done, he immediately dispelled his full bring and dropped to his knees, panting from the effort. "Not coughing up blood, good sign," he muttered as he got back up and fled the cove, no longer bearing any energy to continue the fight. "Looks like Chad's out," Achilles remarked, seeing the man move before returning his focus to the abomination in front of him. "Now, let's see. If I remember, the first of your kind died choking on molten metal." The chimera before him roared in rage, a serpent for the tail, a vicious lion on the left side, a goat on the right, the two heads side by side, and the middle looking like a disturbing mix of the two beasts. "I could follow tradition," he spun his spear while bringing up his shield, "but where's the fun in that?" He smirked before charging. The chimera roared out a torrent of flame from the lion head, forcing Achilles to raise his shield while continuing his charge, protecting himself from the worst of it. When his shield began to get too hot, absorbing so much direct heat, he dropped and slid to close the distance, only to be met with the charging head of the goat. He managed to block it with his shield, but without the time to make it into a deflect. Instead of taking the full force of the blow, he felt the wind get knocked out of him as he became trapped beneath the chimera. The beast pushed itself onto its hind quarters, preparing for another attack, but Achilles readjusted his grip on his spear and thrust it into the chimera's chest as it fell toward him. Moving quickly from there, he let the beast's weight push it further onto his spear before grabbing the lower jaws of both heads and pulling them down, effectively impaling the beast. Not content with that, he took his shield and bashed the two heads repeatedly until they hung limp. The serpent tried to strike, but he dodged and caught it by the neck before snapping it. "Looks like I pierced its spine." "Ha ha. That was lucky." Achilles laughed, inspecting the damage before pulling his spear free. He turned to look for more prey, but Chiron returned to the battle and it looked like all the other monsters were dead. He found Jackie tending to Chad as he and his two companions went over to the Fullbringers. "Looks like you've exhausted your energy, but it hasn't affected your life force," Jackie said, breathing a sigh of relief before noticing the centaur and heroes. "So, what are you planning now that you know?" she asked, making the group look to each other. With Jason's smuggling ring out of the picture, I think the legacy of the other heroes should be safe, for now. Chiron started. But, now that I've seen the evil of this Wywak for myself, I don't think even I can sit idly by and wait for this to blow over. He turned and began trotting back to the temple. I'll get Medea and I'll join you in your war. Check the description for the links to the author.